into the chi refining stage, right? Also, that place you asked about, it must hold some kind of opportunity, right? Once I break through to the golden core stage, I'll take you there soon. Otherwise, Brother Mew won't be able to find it. Jiang Ruochen, who was standing next to Zhao Zunjin, paused for a moment after hearing what Zhao Zunjin said, and then wrote down the information. Although his master knew about his own background, he knew very little about his master's identity. Some of his knowledge even came from strange fragments of memory, and he had no idea what those things were. However, Jiang Ruochen wisely refrained from asking, because she could tell that although her master was smiling, he was definitely not in a good mood. Looking at Zhao Zunjin, Mu Yongui inexplicably thought of Shen Qinghen. Betraying his comrades, hypocrisy, and an almost pathological obsession with power, all these actions stepped into his minefield. Mu Yonggui's slightly smiling expression was actually rather unpleasant. You're right, I did return to the chi refining stage for some reasons. My golden core stage, companions were truly a lifesaver. But I wouldn't even want someone like you as a dog. Having said that, a sword aura appeared out of thin air and slashed towards Zhao Zunjin. Zhao Zunjin gritted his teeth and held his sword to defend. A series of resounding booms echoed, and with the impact, Zhao Zunjin leaped backward, his face showing some displeasure. Brother Mew, is that really the case? Aren't you afraid that we'll perish together? You don't even want to know the location of that opportunity. The longsword in Zhao Zunjin's hand hummed, and a powerful sword aura gathered within it, ready to be unleashed. Oh, you know I've fallen to this state, but do you know what my former level was? Mu Yongui casually formed a sword incantation in his hand, and a glint of sword light appeared at his fingertips. HMPH, so what if you're a nascent soul cultivator? So what if you're a deity transformation cultivator? Even a sword immortal is no match for you. You, a mere chi refining cultivator, what right do you have to refuse me? Zhao Zunjin's face was contorted with madness, and he practically roared out what he was saying. He sensed the aura of death in Mu Yonggui's sword technique, and he couldn't even muster the thought of dodging, because he knew that if he made a move, he would definitely die. What a coincidence, I really was a sword immortal before. After saying that, wisps of sword energy gathered beside Mu Yongui, forming a slender white sword phantom behind him. The sword energy was awe-inspiring and hummed. Ryuachin, close your eyes for a moment. After saying that, the girl beside him turned around in tacit agreement. Out. Mu Yongui sighed, and after speaking, a white sword light ripped through the space behind him, stabbing towards Zhao Zunjin with an extremely strange speed. Zhao Zunjin hurriedly unleashed the ink-black sword energy from his longsword with all his might. The dark sword energy was magnificent, surging towards Mu Yongui like a monstrous wave. The two sword energies collided, white against black. Although the white sword energy was extremely thin, it was like a beam of light shining in the darkness, tearing a rift in the inky night sky. Without slowing down at all, it directly sliced off Zhao Zunjin's head. Zhao Zunjin's headless corpse collapsed, while the heads rolling around him still held incredulous expressions. After killing Zhao Zunjin, the white light vanished in a wisp of wind. Arriving at the corpse, Mu Yongui picked up the demon pearl, then glanced at Zhao Zunjin's sword, hesitated for a moment, and then turned and walked away. Mu Yongui went to the riverbank and washed his face. The girl beside him didn't say anything. I'm still not used to using sword techniques without a sword. Mu Yongui sighed inwardly. Seeing that her master seemed to have perked up a bit, Jiang Ruochen asked the question that had been bothering her. Master, shouldn't we take his sword away? Mu Yongui smiled, ruffled the girl's hair, and explained. No need, it's too ugly. Besides, my other purpose in bringing you into the Meteor Dragon Mountains is this unborn sword. He then briefly recounted the story of that obsession. After listening, Jiang Ruochen took out a handkerchief from her bosom and mustered her courage to say to Mu Yongui, Master. Seeing this, Mu Yongui understood and bent down slightly. Jiang Ruochen, holding a handkerchief, tiptoed and nervously wiped the water droplets from Mu Yonggui's face, then voiced her thoughts. Ruochen will always stay by Shizun's side. Please rely on Ruochen more, okay? Why do you say that? Faced with this somewhat strange question, Mu Yongui was taken aback for no apparent reason. Jiang Ruochen said, because Master looks very tired right now. Seeing the slight worry on the girl's fair face, Mu Yonggui's displeasure dissipated, and he smiled at her. Yes, I will. After doing all this, Mu Yongui slowly said, let's go. Jiang Ruochen responded. Chapter 25, White Worms. Demons, like horned foxes, are born with insufficient aptitude, and even if they cultivate, they can only barely break through to the level of mortal beasts. In this meteor dragon mountain range, they must always be vigilant in order to survive. A horned fox cautiously followed the tracks left by an unknown demon, scraps of human clothing occasionally falling to the ground along the way. It sniffed the air, preparing to continue, but suddenly stopped. Its large bamboo leaf-like ears perked up, listening intently to sounds coming from afar. Then it nimbly jumped to the side and quietly hid itself. The great demon that chased after them has returned. The horned fox thought to itself. Sure enough, a moment later, a huge figure slowly walked over from a distance. It was the great demon that had just left. But the great demon looked very strange at this moment. Its head was lowered, as if it might fall off at any moment, and blood was constantly dripping from its body, emitting a pungent smell of blood. Its movements were extremely stiff, like a walking corpse, struggling to move forward. What surprised the horned fox even more was that the great demon was carrying two humans on its back, and they were alive. A strong sense of doubt and unease welled up in the horned fox's heart. This bizarre scene was beyond its comprehension. The horned fox was becoming increasingly eerily strange, yet the reason for its oddity was unclear. If one were to quote the boy on the demon's back, it would be something like this. The uncanny valley effect has kicked in. The three corpses on that battlefield had been burned by a burst of spiritual fire. The boy and girl who left that place sat on the corpse of the soul-devouring spider and headed towards the heart of the mountain range. The girl sitting on the demon's back parted her red lips slightly. So, as long as Ryuachin discovers that someone has murderous intent towards Master, she can kill, right? Upon hearing this, the boy looked helpless and said, "Isn't that a bit too extreme? What I meant was that one should always be wary of others." The two people here are Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin. Mu Yungui muttered to himself about the girl's thought process. Just as he had expected, she was very likely to go down the path of demonic cultivation. So, he spent a lot of effort explaining to her. At this moment, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. Mu Yungui suddenly sensed a demon approaching from afar. He was about to warn the person beside him when he saw that she had already become alert. However, before they could take any action, the spirit-devouring spider beneath him roared, and its demonic power instantly spread out, scaring away the lurking demons around them. Seeing this, Mu Yungui smiled with satisfaction. He reached out and gently poked a milky white insect next to him and said with a slight upturn of his mouth, "Pretty well behaved, indeed somewhat different." This little insect was the mother worm of the mind-binding insect that Zhao Zunjin had previously removed from his mind. Mu Yungui had not forgotten this thing, so he brought it along as well. Having lost all its offspring, the spirit worm appeared extremely weak. At this moment, it was quietly lying on the demon core of the spirit-devouring spider, controlling the huge corpse beneath it to move forward slowly. The spirit insect let out a weak chirp, its voice revealing a hint of fear and helplessness. "Don't worry, since I said I'd spare your life, I won't go back on my word. Don't be afraid, I'm not a bad person," Mu Yungui reassured him calmly. Then he asked, "You shouldn't have any problems tracking down this demonic aura, right?" The spirit insect seemed to understand his words and nodded weakly. Although it expressed doubt about the last sentence, it couldn't care less about that at the moment. After receiving an affirmative answer, Mu Yungui smiled and nodded, signaling it to continue. As if encouraged, the spirit worm immediately quickened its pace. It controlled the corpse of the spirit-devouring spider and strode forward. Jiang Ryuachin watched as Mu Yungui poked the little white worm with his finger, and a sense of curiosity welled up in her heart. She also reached out her little hand and gently poked the little white worm. When she touched the little white worm, she felt that it was soft to the touch and seemed to have no aggression, so she pinched it again. Of course, even though it was dissatisfied, the little white worm didn't dare to say anything. "Master, can this goo worm still control others after losing its offspring?" Jiang Ryuachin asked. She originally thought that this kind of worm could only control others through its offspring, but now it seems that this is not the case. Yes, although the spirit insects seem weak and are mostly used as goo worms to control others, they actually have certain abilities of their own. They can possess inanimate objects and control their corpses, Mu Yungui explained. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin frowned. "This insect is quite clever. Why not keep it? Wouldn't letting it go become a hidden danger? Master, perhaps we should just kill it." As she thought of this, her hands gleamed. However, when the white worm realized Jiang Ryuachin's intention, it quickly shrank its body and turned its head away. The spirit-devouring spider beneath it also stopped because of the white worm's movement. The spirit insect looked pitifully at Mu Yungui, as if pleading for his help. Seeing this, Mu Yungui explained, The spirit insect itself is not aggressive, and in a sense it is just a tool. They are one of the few gentle races among the demons. I once received help from a spirit insect that had become a demon lord. I promised her that if I encountered any of her kind, I would spare their lives if possible. Mu Yungui recalled the spirit insects she had encountered in the 10,000 demon forest in her previous life, and felt a pang of nostalgia. The white-haired girl always wore an ill-fitting, oversized robe, and her beautiful eyes were adorned with dark circles, as if she could never get enough sleep. However, saying has become a demon lord at this point is not quite right. In a sense, it refers to the future. Looking at the little white worm in front of him, he wondered if it had anything to do with the white-haired girl. It might come in handy later. Hearing what Mu Yungui said, the little white worm hurriedly nodded in agreement, and with renewed vigor led the two on a fast journey. Before long, they stopped at the highest point of the mountain range. Unlike the towering, dense forests that blocked out the sky, the view from the higher reaches of the mountain range was entirely different. The grass at my feet wasn't tall, and a gentle breeze blew by. From this spot, I could overlook the entire Dragonfall mountain range, and at the edge of my field of vision, I could vaguely see villages nestled. Where? Is this the place? Where? The source is indeed ahead. Mu Yungui sensed that the strange demonic aura was emanating from ahead. All right, you can go now, but it's best not to leave the Meteor Dragon Mountains before you take human form. After setting some rules with the spirit insect, Mu Yungui jumped off the demon's back and with his disciple, prepared to head towards their destination. Waya Tilda. As they were about to leave, the spirit worm seemed to remember something, and then it began to manipulate the corpse of the spirit-devouring spider towards the two of them. After listening, Mu Yungui was slightly taken aback, then clicked his tongue in amazement. Ryuachin, the spirit insect, asked you to hand her your hand. It seems it wants to give you some gift. Really, it doesn't have any bad intentions, does it? Jiang Ryuachin couldn't understand what the white worm was saying, and she hadn't really liked it before, but since her master had said so, she still reached out her hand. The spirit insect felt the powerful light energy, even without being deliberately released, exerting a strong sense of pressure on the small insect. It crawled down from under the demon core and leisurely landed on Jiang Ryuachin's little fingertip. Waya Tilda. A faint white light flashed, and the spirit insect spat out a white bead the size of a fish egg from its mouth. Then its aura weakened further. Waya. Master, what did it just do? The girl felt as if she had an inexplicable connection with the little insect in front of her. A one-sided contract means that it recognizes you as its master, and from now on, Ryuachin can use this contract to control it at will. Waya. Mu Yungui continued translating. That white bead is a gift from it. It can detect the aura of some divine soul techniques. After saying that, the spirit insect returned to its resting place on the demon core, gestured to the two of them, and then manipulated the corpse of the spirit-devouring spider back towards the dense forest. Perhaps due to its haste, it tripped over vines on the ground, lost its balance, and tumbled downwards, crashing into a large rock and remaining motionless. It seemed somewhat embarrassing. Fortunately, after a few moments, the enormous corpse rose again and then staggered away. Can this little guy survive? Seeing this situation, Jiang Ryuachin looked at the small white bead in her hand, and then at the corpse of the soul-devouring spider that was moving like a turtle and couldn't help but complain. The spatial ring in his hand lit up, and Mu Yungui took out a piece of silver from it. Using some unknown magic, he tore the silver into an exquisite chain and tied it to the small bead in Jiang Ryuachin's hand, making it into a rather simple necklace. It looks really good on Ryuachin's neck, Tilda. Mu Yungui was very satisfied with his handiwork, so he helped the girl put on the necklace and replied, I have a feeling that we might encounter it again in the future, but I'm not sure what the little white worm will look like then. Chapter 26, The Fall. After bidding farewell to the spirit insect, in front of the two was a deep hole covered by a thick layer of vines. If they hadn't been so close, it would have been difficult to spot. Upon careful recollection of the environment after entering the mountains, I realized that I hadn't seen a single pit that was even slightly deep, and this deep pit seemed out of place no matter how I looked at it. No wonder this place has been difficult to discover for so long. Cultivators flying overhead can hardly sense this aura. Mu Yungui's explanation clarified things. The girl swung her longsword, slashing at the vines. However, due to the influence of the surrounding energy, the vines were exceptionally tough, requiring her to use magical power to sever them completely. Only then did the deep cave reveal its full appearance. About 100 meters wide, with walls that looked as if they were man-made, and it did not look like a naturally formed circular pit at all. A strange purple aura slowly emanated from the cave. Mu Yungui released a wisp of divine thought downwards, but after extending hundreds of meters deep, it seemed to be blocked by some force and could not go any further. He frowned slightly and tried to extend his divine sense downwards again, but the result was the same. When his divine sense reached a certain depth, it was dispersed by a powerful will. It seems this is where the obsession with the legend of sword and fairy resides. Mu Yungui secretly confirmed this in his heart. Ultimately, we'll only know after we go down and explore it ourselves. So Mu Yungui turned to Jiang Ryuachin and said, "Ryuachin, I'm going down to take a look. You wait for me here and don't wander off." After saying that, he prepared to jump into the cave. Jiang Ryuachin stared intently at the bottomless cave that exuded an ominous aura, feeling somewhat uneasy. The girl grabbed Mu Yungui's sleeve and said urgently, "Ryuachin wants to go down with you too. You haven't learned the art of flying yet, it's a bit dangerous," Mu Yungui explained helplessly. The two are currently only in the chi refining stage. Although in terms of killing power they can be compared with cultivators of a higher realm, their spiritual energy reserves are something that cannot be changed. Flying techniques are among the most energy-consuming methods. Shen Qinghan only brought the sword back to the sword sect when he was in the nascent soul stage, and Mu Yungui remembered this clearly, so it cannot be ruled out that a sword of this grade might have a protective spirit. If it were a matter of retrieving the sword using divine sense, that would be manageable. Mu Yungui didn't dwell on other methods. After all, he was currently just a minor cultivator in the chi refining stage, and it would be extremely difficult for him to reclaim the sword using his own strength. "Master, teach me now. I'll learn right away very quickly." Seeing that her master clearly didn't want to take her along, she realized that this place might be dangerous, and the usually well-behaved and sensible girl became somewhat anxious. She tugged at Mu Yungui's sleeve, looking at him expectantly with longing and anticipation in her eyes. The art of sword control requires at least a foundation establishment stage cultivator to master. A chi refining stage cultivator's spiritual energy reserves are insufficient, so forget about it. Moreover, even if you learn the art of sword control with your current cultivation level, you will not be able to fly on a sword for an extended period of time. "Even now, I can only briefly control the sword," Mu Yungui explained. Jiang Ryuachin became even more anxious as she listened to Mu Yungui's explanation, but she didn't know how to refute him, so she just whispered, "But master, you're also in the chi refining stage now." The girl muttered to herself, somewhat afraid that Mu Yungui would be angry, yet also very worried. The two were silent for a moment. Mu Yungui lowered his head and fell into deep thought. "My cultivation level has fallen to this point for some reason." That's exactly what Mu Yungui told the bewildered young Empress. In a sense, from Jiang Ryuachin's perspective, Mu Yungui is an immortal who has maintained his youthful appearance for a long time, but has fallen to this state. Jiang Ryuachin stared intently at him, as if waiting for some answer. It wouldn't hurt to lie to Ryuachin a little more. However, just as he was about to speak, he noticed that Jiang Ryuachin had suddenly become unusually quiet. He looked up and was surprised to see glistening tears in Jiang Ryuachin's eyes. "Ryuachin doesn't want to be abandoned again, master, I beg you." Jiang Ryuachin's voice trembled, tinged with sobs, making one feel pity for her. She gripped Mu Yungui's clothes tightly with her small hands, but dared not stop him. She just squeezed the clothes hard, her body trembling slightly. Looking into those eyes, Mu Yungui paused for a moment, then sighed. "It's not that dangerous, okay? Let's go down together." Thinking that Jiang Ryuachin could only rely on him as her only family member. Abandoning the young girl would indeed make her feel uneasy. Mu Yungui frowned slightly, rubbed his cheeks, which showed a somewhat embarrassed expression, and then picked up the petite and adorable girl with one hand. Jiang Ryuachin wrapped her arms around Mu Yungui's neck and sat on one of Mu Yungui's hands. The 14 or 15-year-old girl was petite and light, so carrying her didn't put too much of a burden on Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui looked down at the girl, whose eyes were still brimming with tears, and gently instructed her, "Hold on tight." Having said that, he held the sword in his left hand, tightly embraced the girl with his right, and then leaped into the bottomless cave without hesitation. As they continued to fall, their descent accelerated, and the faint glimmer of light they could still see gradually disappeared into the endless darkness, leaving only the two figures falling. As they counted down the time it took to fall, Mu Yungui's eyes lit up. The long sword in his hand flew out instantly, like a bolt of lightning, flying straight forward and landing steadily at their feet, slowing their descent. The girl in his arms did not flinch in fear. Instead, she remained remarkably calm. She gently closed her eyes, emanating a warm light that illuminated the space around them. However, even with this power of light, they still couldn't see the bottom of the cave, as if the abyss had no end. The fall continued, and the purple demonic energy below grew increasingly dense, eventually almost condensing into a solid mist. Once one came into contact with this demonic energy, the flow of spiritual energy within the body would be disrupted or even stagnate. Fortunately, with the protection of the girl in their arms, they were able to temporarily keep the demonic energy out. After a long wait, they finally saw the bottom. The two men perked up and used all their strength to control the longswords beneath their feet, landing steadily on the ground. After landing safely, the two of them breathed a sigh of relief. The spiritual energy transformed into light, illuminating the cave and covering an area of 100 meters, thus revealing the surrounding environment. Scattered around were the remains of demonic beasts. Without the ability to leap thousands of meters into the air, this was the inevitable outcome of their reckless descent. The skeletons had been weathered for countless years. Mu Yungui could easily touch them and they crumbled like dirt. Apart from the few skeletons of demonic beasts that had wandered in, the area was relatively clean. Its spiritual power was severely restricted and was even being slowly drained away by the intense purple aura. Mu Yungui crushed a spirit stone, casually summoned a few pills to restore spiritual energy, and swallowed them to recover the spiritual energy that had been mostly depleted. Mu Yungui wasn't too worried about the current situation, since he wouldn't be staying here for long. He was even prepared to run away at any moment when he first came down, but fortunately, no guardian spirit or anything like that appeared, so he was quite satisfied. Jiang Ryuachin extended her power of light and stayed beside Mu Yungui, helping him to reduce the erosion of demonic energy. Seeing that the light barrier was strong enough to envelop the two of them, the girl gently exhaled. The girl felt much better knowing that she could help her master. Bathed in light, the girl gazed at a 3-foot-long, transparent sword, as thin as a cicada's wing, floating in mid-air within a cone-shaped pit half a meter deep. Wisps of purple energy flowed slowly within the crystal-clear blade. Above the transparent hilt, there flowed an ancient and sacred golden aura. The two different auras converged, merged, and dissipated at the hilt. The two walked closer, and Jiang Ryuachin asked, "Master, is this the sword you spoke of?" Mu Yungui gazed intently at the two immortal swords, emanating different auras before him, and slowly spoke. This sword is called Obsession. Chapter 27, Snake, Strange. That looks dangerous. Although I wanted to take the sword directly from here, feeling the two opposing forces within it, it didn't seem like it would be that easy. Mu Yungui couldn't help but complain. The girl next to him listened, and although she didn't understand at all, she also seemed to be deep in thought. However, Mu Yungui was speaking to himself and didn't intend to rely on the clueless Ryuachin. After a moment of contemplation, he instructed the girl. "Ryuachin, once I grasp the sword, no matter what happens, do not disturb me except when I call your name." At that moment, cut off my hand. Mu Yungui decided to use his divine sense to go to the world, manifested in the sword's hilt, and investigate the two auras within the sword. Before the girl could ask anything, Mu Yungui stretched out his right hand and gripped the hilt of one of the world's strongest immortal swords tightly, diverting a portion of his divine sense into the sword guard. Even if there is an extremely powerful will within the sword guard that could instantly obliterate Mu Yungui's divine sense, he could quickly react and sever the connection with his obsession, thus escaping, although he might suffer severe injuries and become an idiot for a short period of time. However, Mu Yungui did not believe that his divine sense from both lifetimes would be so easily destroyed. Even if my divine sense is damaged, Ryuachin will still take good care of me, right? Thinking of Jiang Ryuachin, who was gradually becoming stronger and more mature, and recalling that scene for a moment, Mu Yungui smiled slightly. Putting aside his strange thoughts for the moment, Mu Yungui acted without hesitation, channeling his divine sense into the sword. After a moment of disorientation, the world spun around. Once my own sword, Suhui, manifested as a flowing river after its rank was upgraded. Now, I'm a little curious about what the space inside the sword slot of obsession will look like. Despite the intense headache caused by his divine sense leaving his body and entering the sword, Mu Yungui gritted his teeth and looked at the world within the sword's hilt formed by this immortal sword. Information about the space created by the legend of Sword and Fairy was poured into Mu Yungui's mind. At this moment, Mu Yun returned to the space where the obsession had been formed 10,000 years ago. A scene from 10,000 years ago. At first glance, even Mu Yungui, who had seen many sword realms of extremely high quality, was still shocked. Big. Before Mu Yungui unfolded an incredibly breathtaking scene, a vast and boundless expanse of sky and earth, the sky above which was a dim red, devoid of any other objects. Between heaven and earth, there are two enormous dragon statues, so large that their full forms cannot be seen, supporting the entire space. Among them, a golden dragon, gleaming with golden light, descended upside down from the sky. Its sharp dragon claw pressed down hard on the head of another purple dragon, pinning it to the ground and subjecting it to humiliation and punishment. This purple dragon was not unfamiliar to Mu Yungui, because the purple demonic energy emanated from its body. However, the purple dragon lay sprawled on the ground, unable to move, relying solely on its aura to resist the pressure from its opponent. Its vertical pupils revealed intense killing intent and hatred, released without any concealment. Not a dragon, but a snake. Mu Yungui looked up at the image of the purple dragon, somewhat incredulous. But it was true, the giant purple snake did not grow dragon claws. Within the obsession with the immortal sword, there were the lingering auras of two immortal-level demons, which greatly broadened Mu Yungui's horizons. 10,000 years ago, how could a snake demon have cultivated to such a level? Mu Yungui sighed. 10,000 years ago, before the self-awareness of the heavenly Tao had awakened, it was possible for ancient cultivators to reach the so-called realm of immortals after mastering the methods of cultivation. In ancient times, the rules of heaven were like a fruit tree for a long time. The first cultivators who mastered the cultivation method picked the fruit and took control of a part of the heavenly Tao. If Mu Yungui remembered correctly, besides controlling the rules of wind and rain, the Dragon Clan also held the power to grant some demons the qualification to become immortals. However, later, under the rule of cultivators who controlled and occupied the Tao, a battle for the Tao broke out between heaven and earth, causing chaos in the world. The cultivators who controlled the Tao could destroy or rebuild the rules with a wave of their hand. After a period of time, the world was shattered and mountains and rivers were submerged. As a result, self-awareness was born in the world, which wiped out many cultivators who had already become immortals. The world regulated its own rules, and the world gradually recovered its vitality. However, this also resulted in imperfections in the great Tao, and even the cultivation realm was limited to the tribulation transcending stage, making it difficult to advance even slightly. In his previous life, among the cultivators of Mu Yungui's era, only Shen Qinghan managed to barely touch the threshold of that realm after possessing other bodies, and collecting various heaven-defying bloodlines and talents. Before Mu Yungui could make a move, the boundless purple Dharma image began to stir. The huge snake head, which had been hanging low, slowly rose, and its body began to sway, seemingly gathering power. As the swaying became larger and larger, the giant purple snake finally began to twist its body with all its might, trying to break free from control. Seeing this, the golden dragon let out a low roar, filled with disdain and contempt. Its body trembled slightly, and a dazzling golden light surged from its body, burning like golden flames. As the light surged, the golden dragon pressed down even harder on the purple giant snake with its claws. A majestic and ancient voice emanated from the golden dragon's mouth, echoing throughout the entire space. Ye, since you refused to accept the blessings of our dragon clan and even injured one of our cultivators, do you really think you can ascend to immortality with your lowly bloodline? What a pipe dream. Upon hearing this, the giant purple serpent's eyes flashed with anger, but even more so with resentment and defiance. What I do is none of your business. It struggled again, trying to break free from the golden dragon's suppression. However, the more it struggled, the deeper the dragon's claws pierced the snake's body, and purple demonic energy, like a surging torrent, continuously gushed out from the wound, spreading outwards. Despite its increasingly severe wounds, the giant purple serpent named Yi remained unconcerned. It simply continued to try to raise its head, mocking the golden dragon that was suppressing it with a hint of sarcasm. HMPH, isn't it because you're afraid I'll become an immortal by my own power that you sent the dragon immortal down to suppress me? You really are a bunch of cowards. Jinlong didn't care and simply said, HMPH, don't think too highly of yourself. The master just thinks that it would be a disgrace to the demon race for a lowly demon like you to advance to immortality. I kindly offered you my dragon bloodline to help you transform into a dragon, yet you repeatedly refused my good intentions. Since that's the case, then may you perish." After saying that, the dragon claw emitted golden light, lifted itself up, and then slammed down again. "Unfortunately, I am destined to ascend to immortality with what you call lowly blood." His enormous snake eyes snapped open to a slit, its crazed expression reaching a frenzy. It twisted its body again, trying to overturn the golden dragon. The two powerful auras collided violently, as if to tear the entire world apart. If no one else were present at this moment, perhaps none of this would cause much of a stir. But unfortunately, there is another person standing here besides those two Dharma images. The demonic energy and dragon energy intertwined, forming a surging, towering wave that swept towards Mu Yungui, who was as insignificant as dust to the two enormous Dharma images. Good grief, they're after me, aren't they? Faced with this sudden impact, Mu Yungui narrowed his eyes, tightly holding onto his divine sense, and did his best to resist the terrifying aftershocks. Beyond the world of swords, Jiang Ryuchen stood guard earnestly beside Mu Yungui, sword in hand. The girl watched as the yellow and purple auras briefly intertwined within the sword, which was as thin as a cicada's wing. Then, her master's face turned somewhat pale. Jiang Ryuchen's expression changed drastically, but remembering Mu Yungui's instructions, she was unable to take any action. She could only become vigilant and pray silently in her heart. 10,000 years ago, the methods of cultivation were not yet perfected, yet such an ordinary snake demon could cultivate to the point of becoming an immortal. It's truly eye-opening. After entering the sword world, Mu Yungui did not move at all, but simply watched the two huge Dharma images fighting in the sky, revealing the reason for the formation of the Meteor Dragon mountain range. This is the corpse of that abnormal creature. Could that dragon, merely a soul descended to Earth, really kill a cultivator at the peak of the tribulation transcending stage? Mu Yungui analyzed. No, we didn't kill the Yi. We could only suppress it here. After withstanding the impact, the two auras in the world weakened slightly, but it was difficult to detect. However, Mu Yungui still managed to catch them. Then the two deities repeated their dialogue again and again. The two Dharma forms were not, in the end, their true forms. The golden dragon's body likely perished in the heavenly Tao's obliteration 10,000 years ago, while the souls of Yi and the golden dragon were trapped here, fighting for an unknown period. Ultimately, Yi's body disintegrated, transforming into a mountain range. After thinking it over, Mu Yungui took a step forward. Logically speaking, the two Dharma images, each the size of Mount Sumeru, should have been completely oblivious to the tiny, mustard seed-sized incarnation of Mu Yungui's divine sense. However, after taking a step, both Dharma images stopped. Mu Yungui raised an eyebrow. Just as he had expected, he had indeed been noticed. The two forces here have been in balance for thousands of years, and I am the only one who has come here to break that balance. Humans. Jinlong and Yi both stopped fighting at this moment and stared intently at the human cultivator. The unfinished game left over from 10,000 years ago seems to have been given a piece called variable. Since he entered this place in a divine form, Mu Yungui conjured up his sword from his previous life, Zhuhui, and casually held it in his hand. His appearance had undergone a complete transformation, utterly different from the reborn 15-year-old boy in black. Now, he seemed to have traveled through time back to his past life, dressed in a pristine white robe, its flowing fabric giving him the appearance of an immortal descending to Earth. The white robe swayed gently in the wind, exuding an otherworldly aura. Seeing the two Dharma images staring straight at him without saying a word, Mu Yungui felt a little awkward, so he complained. "Why are you looking at me? I'm just a passing cultivator who poses no threat to you." Chapter 28, Together Slaying the Immortal Dragon. To be honest, if a low-level human cultivator suddenly appeared on a battlefield where immortals were fighting, claiming to be just passing by and asking for nothing, even the most naive person wouldn't believe it. Both Yi and Jinlong were speechless at what Mu Yungui said. A brief silence. "This place is where my dragon clan used the execution sword to slay the traitors. How can you say I'm just passing by?" the golden dragon said coldly. With a thought, Mu Yungui secretly memorized the execution sword of the immortal dragon in the celestial realm. Jinlong carefully observed the white-robed cultivator before him, who appeared as small as an ant. His divine sense didn't seem particularly strong. However, not only did the cultivator dare to enter this realm of divine sense, but he was also spouting nonsense in front of him. Clearly, he knew the situation. The golden dragon's imposing aura was now palpable, as if it wished it could swat this annoying little fly to death, but it was powerless to do anything about it. At this moment, the human cultivators, whom I usually regard as ants, have the ability to change the course of the battle. Then Jinlong abruptly changed the subject in his next sentence. I am a celestial dragon. This time, I have channeled my divine sense into this secret treasure and descended to the mortal realm to slay this rebellious demon. If you wish to come here seeking your fortune, why aren't you coming to my aid right now? As long as I suppress this demonic serpent, you can attack with all your might. After the deed is done, I can bestow upon you a trace of dragon energy. If you can comprehend its Taoist principles, you might be able to touch the threshold of becoming an immortal. Oh, I'll think about it. Mu Yungui listened with interest to the reward offered by Jinlong, seemingly lost in thought. Then Mu Yungui turned around and asked the snake demon with a smile, Your name is Yi, right? Can you offer a better reward? The highest bidder wins, right? Upon hearing this, Yi looked at the somewhat unreliable human swordsman and said directly, My cultivation technique is self-created, only suitable for snake demons, not humans. However, if you don't want to become an immortal dog, you'd better not have that trace of dragon energy. Otherwise, after becoming an immortal, that trace of dragon energy will become your shackles, turning you into a dog like him. HMPH, HMPH, HMPH. After saying that, Yi glared fiercely at Jinlong again. If looks could kill, Jinlong would have been killed 1,000 times over by now. Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui drew the Suhui sword that had transformed into his hand. He glanced at Mu Yungui and thought that the person in front of him was nothing more than a sycophantic opportunist. He just felt a little regretful that he would die here. Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui laughed and said, Actually, ever since I came in, I've felt that he doesn't have the ethereal demeanor I imagined at all. He seems to be just like you said, so I'll just leave it at that. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, Jian Ye's eyes showed a hint of disbelief. Mu Yungui laughed angrily. Hey, do you think I'm the kind of person who would sacrifice everything, even my freedom, to attain enlightenment? Too bad I'm not. If this happened to me, I might do the same thing. Fight if I can win, run if I can't. But speaking of which, you ancient cultivators were just so simple-minded, especially you demon cultivators. Unlike later generations with all sorts of cunning and scheming, if it were me, I would have started developing my skills stealthily during the Mahayana stage. Jinlong watched as Mu Yungui continued gesturing at Yi, and a surge of anger rose within him. How dare this human cultivator be so audacious as to disregard him? Doesn't he know his own identity? He is a being from the immortal realm. Even though his physical body cannot descend to the mortal realm due to the constraints of the immortal realm, he is still a force that humans can easily provoke, even though he is possessed by a sword. How dare you, a mere human, plot against me with this monster? The golden dragon roared angrily. This is not a choice, it is an order. As he finished speaking, a powerful pressure suddenly descended, sweeping towards Mu Yungui. However, faced with this oppressive aura, Mu Yungui lightly waved his sleeve, dispersing it, and his gaze towards the golden dragon turned colder. Jinlong was somewhat surprised by what he saw, but quickly regained his composure. The other party definitely had a trump card, otherwise they wouldn't have entered this place. From what you just heard in your conversation, you rejected the dragon bloodline and evolved into a celestial dragon. Is that more important than your life? Mu Yungui turned to look at you beside him and asked seriously. But I'm a snake. I feel that after transforming into a dragon, I won't be myself anymore, Yi blurted out. Then, seemingly dissatisfied with his statement, he paused and added, I was born a snake, and I don't want to be a dragon, so I refuse. After hearing this, Mu Yungui was taken aback. He was somewhat surprised by the answer, as he had thought there was some more complicated reason. So Mu Yungui said, Actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If I were to accept his gift, it would mean becoming an immortal like him, which I am unwilling to do. The dissenting opinion of Mu Yungui did change his impression of this human cultivator somewhat. Nonsense. However, at that moment, the golden dragon suddenly attacked, its enormous claws slamming down on Mu Yungui with the force to tear the sky apart. Mu Yungui's figure dissipated, turning into specks of starlight that scattered in all directions. When he reformed, he was already standing beside Yi. Jinlong was somewhat surprised. Just the escape technique used by this white-robed cultivator required dispersing one's divine sense. If one's divine sense was dispersed during the process, one's entire consciousness might simply dissipate. To perform this technique, one needs not only a powerful and precise mental focus, but also sufficient courage to attempt it. The other party is quite extraordinary. However, he quickly calmed down. Then Mu Yungui continued to accelerate the chaos in this world, stating directly, "It seems you didn't like what I just said. Can't they even realize that they are already dead? How long have you been fighting here? Don't you realize it?" Mu Yungui then described the world 10,000 years in the future. His expression softened somewhat after hearing this. After all, she had felt a slight sense of unease, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was. Jinlong, however, refused to believe it. Subsequently, the two reached a rare consensus, tacitly extending a wisp of their divine sense beyond the sword. Two wisps of divine souls emerged, and outside the sword was still a celestial sword. However, the once blood-soaked, demonic corpse of the snake demon had turned into white bones, and over millions of years, it had become a majestic mountain range. What a joke, I'm going to return to the immortal realm. This is just a lowly snake demon from the lower realm. How could this be? Jinlong's face gradually turned frenzied, and his original rationality vanished after the truth was revealed. Since that's the case, I'll make you all pay with your lives. A wisp of dragons might surged outward from the sword, heading straight for Mu Yungui's body. Since I no longer have a body to carry my divine thoughts, then the other party shouldn't expect to have an easy time either. Outside the sword, Jiang Ruochen, who was carefully guarding Mu Yungui's body, suddenly saw a dangerous golden aura surging out from the sword. She raised her hand to block it, but was still violently impacted. The girl managed to block the attack with difficulty, though her face turned somewhat pale. The golden dragon's attack was blocked, and it was somewhat annoyed. It wanted to launch another attack, but it no longer had the chance. Sensing that the golden dragon was distracted, Yi began to resist again. The battlefield was once again drawn back to the battle of souls within the sword. Upon seeing the girl injured, Mu Yungui's expression darkened, and he poured most of his divine sense into the sword. As Mu Yungui's entire divine sense followed his obsession into this world, his sword eyes closed slightly, then opened again, looking up at the two Dharma images locked in combat before him. Although they were still enormous, they were no longer like mayflies trying to shake mountains. Holding the Suhui, Mu Yungui also erected a massive Dharma image, gazing at the two colossal figures in front of him that were already capable of being shaken. The sword energy of the Suhui sword soared into the sky. As Mu Yungui swung it, his divine sense transformed into wisps of sword energy, which danced around the Suhui sword like swimming fish. The golden dragon's eyes were bloodshot with rage. The human cultivator in front of him had become extremely dangerous in just a short time when he wasn't paying attention. If there were no anomalies, the opponent would not have been able to cause any trouble. However, at this moment, the golden dragon was unable to break free and could only watch helplessly as the opponent gathered that dazzling sword light. It's like a child getting a sharp blade. Even if he swings it haphazardly, he can still injure a strong man who can't move. But the child in Jinlong's eyes wasn't just waving his sword around randomly. A buzzing sound began. "Brother Yi, how about we join forces to slay the immortal dragon?" Just then, a calm male voice rang out across the heavens and earth. At the same time, the creature, still locked in combat with the golden dragon, heard these words and its eyes lit up. Its previously exhausted body was instantly filled with power. Despite being covered in wounds, it still roared without hesitation. "That's exactly what I was thinking." Ignoring his own injuries, he opened his blood-red maw and bit down on the golden dragon's neck. The golden dragon roared in pain, but its power had been restrained by the strange creature, and it could not break free. For 10,000 years, it had been the one who had suppressed the giant snake beneath it, but now it was being overturned to the ground by the creature. Its eyes widened as it stared intently at the sword aura in the sky, which wasn't actually that terrifying, its gaze filled with apprehension. At this moment, the sword energy, like an incomparably sharp blade, easily sliced through space, slashing towards the golden dragon with overwhelming momentum. The golden dragon roared, using its last bit of strength to struggle, but it was all too late. The sword energy struck the golden dragon fiercely, instantly severing its head. The massive golden dragon head crashed heavily to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. However, there were no physical objects in this space. After the head was severed, the golden dragon's body gradually became transparent, and then turned into a cloud of golden smoke and flew into the sky. With the death of the golden dragon, a golden rain fell from the heavens and earth. This was not a favor or reward, but rather because after the golden dragon's divine consciousness dissipated, the ownerless dragon energy that had been erased from consciousness fell down one after another. Mu Yungui did not refuse as before. He stood quietly in place, letting the golden raindrops fall on his Dharma form. Each raindrop contained powerful energy, making his Dharma form even more solid. To be honest, wielding this sword also consumed a lot of Mu Yungwee's spiritual energy. At this moment, he only felt very sleepy, but he could only force himself to stay awake. There are still people waiting for him. Jiang Ryuachin, who was guarding Mu Yungwee's body from the outside, saw that the golden aura in the sword hilt had dissipated considerably and even overflowed from the sword. She vaguely guessed what was going on, and her heart relaxed slightly at this moment. Master will not lose. However, Mu Yungwee still didn't want to miss the golden rain. Dragon energy was an invaluable treasure for cultivators in this era. As the golden rain poured down, Mu Yungwee caught a glimpse of the large purple snake with its head drooping beside him, not a single golden raindrop falling on it. Despite Mu Yungwee's assistance, the golden dragon's final counterattack still caused significant damage to Yi, making the giant snake look somewhat terrifying. Mu Yungwee couldn't help but chuckle wryly and tease, "Brother Yi, you don't even want the dragon energy you earned." Yi smiled somewhat helplessly. "It seems that ever since they started hunting me down, I've developed a deep-seated aversion to this so-called pinnacle bloodline. Besides, I'm just a remnant soul trapped in a sword, aren't I?" In the end, Yi fell silent. After Mu Yungwee grasped the immortal sword obsession in his hand, its connection with the meteor dragon mountain range was instantly severed. After the mountain range was severed, a burst of sword energy shot into the sky. In just an instant, it seemed that no one knew about it except for this world. Zhangzhou Tianqiang Mountain. As the highest mountain in central continent, Mount Sky Dome is shrouded in clouds and mist halfway up its slopes. You can't see its entirety from below. At the mountaintop, the air and spiritual energy were extremely thin, and the temperature plummeted. The mountain peak had been shaved off by someone, leaving a flat platform. A pavilion stood there with a plaque that read, Guanshan Temple. Beside the pavilion, several small houses stood nearby. Using some secret method, plum and peach blossoms were planted in this cold place, adding a touch of spring. Apart from the pavilion, it was no different from an ordinary Taoist temple. As the sword energy soared into the sky from the eastern continent, the building inside the Taoist temple named Guantian suddenly lit up. Then, the entire Guantian temple lit up with traces of arrays. From the pavilions and huts to the peach and plum trees, arrays were all shrouded in them, with arrays nested within arrays, lighting up one after another until the top of the sharpened Tianqiang mountain also lit up with golden light. It turns out that the entire mountaintop was covered by a formation, and everything was built upon this formation. Inside the building, there were more than 10 middle-aged cultivators with gray hair, all of whom had extraordinary bearing and powerful aura. Another one, a middle-aged cultivator, was somewhat excited when he saw the great formation light up. Eastern continent, near the Tai Xuan sword sect, the people inside the building, and the people at the Guanshan temple, all engaged in activities that steal from heaven, so they were very sparing with their words when they communicated. Fortunately, everyone already understood. At this moment, a young man dressed in pure white clothes with his long black hair casually draped over his shoulders walked into the building. It was impossible to tell whether he was male or female. After the young man entered, he did not speak with the others, but simply recited a spell. Then the formation in the mountain began to rotate, completing half a circle. The young man suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, his breath weakening, and he looked both pitiful and beautiful. We know, upon seeing this, everyone rushed forward to help the young man. Seeing how strongly the heavenly Tao is reacting, how about ranking it 13th? The young man known as Knowledge spoke slowly, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Uncle Master Mo, why don't you go and look for it?" Then a middle-aged Taoist priest stepped forward from the crowd and chuckled. "Then I'll try my best to find it. But Xiao Zhai, you still need to take care of your health. I have my own methods." After saying this, the middle-aged Taoist transformed into a streak of light and descended the mountain. Chapter 29, Fall and Rebirth. As the heavy rain repaired Mu Yungwee's Dharma form and gradually stopped absorbing its energy, Mu Yungwee put the Dharma form away and casually slumped to the ground. Seeing this, Yi struggled to lift his eyelids and dispersed his Dharma form into purple clouds, which then coalesced into a human shape beside Mu Yungwee. As his humanoid form materialized, Mu Yungwee exclaimed in surprise, "Yi, brother, no, fellow Taoist, so you're a woman." Just then, a breathtakingly beautiful woman quietly appeared beside Mu Yungwee. Her black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, her purple eyes held a hint of allure, and a beauty mark at the corner of her eye added the finishing touch. Her exquisite face exuded an indescribable charm. She wore an elegant purple dress, the hem of which gently brushed the ground like a blooming violet. Her hands rested naturally on the ground, while her fair, snow-white feet were bare. "What, you're tempted by this? I didn't see you this nervous when we were slaying the dragon together, Tilda." Yi tilted her head slightly to look at Mu Yungui, smiled faintly, still stunningly beautiful, but her face was a little pale. "Although I am a snake demon, I think it's not bad to have legs, Tilda," Yi said to himself before Mu Yungui could speak. Yi seemed bored, swaying her exquisite jade feet from side to side. "Can you tell me what the world will be like 10,000 years from now?" Yi's purple eyes lit up, as if she had found interest again, and she asked with some joy. While the golden rain bestowed by the dragon's energy was still falling, Mu Yungui recounted the events that had occurred within the past 10,000 years to Yi Jiang. In just over 10 minutes, Mu Yungui picked out a major event in the world and spoke about it, which took only tens of thousands of words but covered a period of 100,000 years. After saying that, the heavy rain gradually stopped, and the two of them looked at the sky, which was like a red void, and remained silent. After a brief silence, Mu Yungui thought for a moment and spoke first. "Should I put the sword back? Actually, in some ways, cultivators are not much different from ordinary people. In the mortal realm, soldiers often suffer more injuries and disabilities than life and death in battles. Just like when a sword pierces the body, taking it out is not the right option. Instead, you should leave the killing intent that pierced your body inside and wait until the battle is over before receiving treatment. Of course, most people won't survive until then. Even the great demon from 10,000 years ago was like this. After joining forces with Mu Yungui to slay the golden dragon, the bridge between their souls and bodies was severed. The obsession that once connected them to the Meteor Dragon mountain range was now merely held by Mu Yungui. Although her physical body had long since died, the separation of her demonic energy and remnant soul was like opening a wine jar. "No need. After all, it's just a matter of prolonging life. Rather, I'd like to take this opportunity to see what you've described." At the end of his life, he was not particularly saddened, but rather somewhat curious. "Go back." Before Mu Yungui could say anything, his expression changed. Seeing this, Mu Yungui didn't ask anything. He simply returned his divine sense to his physical body and opened his eyes again. He saw that the entire mountain range was shaking. Where the sword had been hanging, a tiny crack began to spread, extending outwards at a speed visible to the naked eye. The crack wasn't particularly large, but it kept extending until it was about to separate the entire strange body, this 10,000-meter mountain range, from head to tail. The massive tremor caused a huge boulder to roll down from the cave entrance. Before Mu Yungui could even adjust to the impact, a boulder crashed down on the two of them. "Ryuachin, I'm back." Mu Yungui scooped the girl up in his arms, and with a flash, the spot where he had been standing was instantly smashed into a large crater. "Master?" Jiang Ryuachin's eyes lit up, and her tense nerves relaxed at a moment that was even more dangerous than before. "As long as my master is by my side, there is nothing to be afraid of. You weren't just trying to walk right into that boulder, were you?" Mu Yungui crushed some flying pebbles with his sword energy, put Jiang Ryuachin down in his arms, and couldn't help but complain. Jiang Ryuachin remained non-committal. After all, Mu Yungui had previously said not to disturb it. If she could stop the boulder, she could accept being injured. Of course, if they couldn't stop him, they could take Mu Yungui away with his sword. But that would be a last resort for Jiang Ryuachin, since she didn't know if it would interfere with Mu Yungui getting the sword. "This place is about to collapse. Let's talk outside." Mu Yungui patted the girl's head, gave her a few instructions, and then focused his attention on the boulder that had fallen from the sky. "If we were to fly on a sword, I wonder if Ryuachin could knock down the oncoming boulder," Mu Yungui pondered to himself. The spiritual energy consumed after arriving here on the sword has not yet been fully recovered, and the divine sense has not recovered after slaying the golden dragon in the sword. In the end, there is still a 1 in 10,000 chance of bringing Jiang Ryuachin out of this place. "Brother Mu, how come your cultivation level is so weak?" Just then, a clear, ethereal voice rang out, and then the last wisp of purple energy remaining in the sword also left, gathering the surrounding purple demonic energy into a large purple serpent. Mu Yungui hesitated, wanting to speak but holding back, and finally just sighed helplessly. It's as if they said something, but then they didn't say anything at all. There was no time for idle chatter. The creature, now transformed into a giant purple snake, opened its massive jaws and bit Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin into its mouth. Then, accompanied by a surge of demonic energy, it rushed straight towards the cave entrance. Mu Yungui, in coordination with the creature, cleaved the falling boulder in two. The wind howled across her face, and the speed was so fast that even the girl in her arms could hardly open her eyes. A moment later, the darkness around her was pushed open by the light, and when she opened her eyes again, the girl found herself high in the sky. But Yi's movements did not stop. It flew towards higher places until the meteor dragon mountain range below could be taken in. The majestic, deep green mountain range below, tens of thousands of meters high, trembled, and then the crack grew larger and larger until it completely split open. Looking at the mountain range that stretched for tens of thousands of meters, Yi wasn't too saddened. Instead, he let out a soft hum. Looking at his past self from 10,000 years ago, Yi seemed to have a hint of satisfaction, a hint of helplessness, but the ending was already set, and a hint of relief. The giant serpent formed from the purple mist held the two of them and stared blankly down at the scene below. The monsters that had scattered and fled in all directions due to the great tremor in the mountains, the giant trees that had collapsed by the cracks, the human villages in the distance, and even further, the cities that stretched as far as the eye could see. You felt only novelty. It's like being imprisoned from childhood until old age, and then being released. Everything in front of you is so unfamiliar, yet it also looks so beautiful. The strange, demonic aura dissipated quickly, leaving the two of them suspended in mid-air. Before long, the dense fog began to thin out, and she only regained her senses when she felt a slight loss of strength. That's all for now. Goodbye, Brother Mu. Then the purple mist dissipated in the air. Mu Yungui sighed, it's too high. Then the two suddenly felt weightless and fell rapidly. With a surge of lingering intent, Mu Yungui, carrying the girl, took advantage of their current altitude of 10,000 meters and maintained their sword riding technique, flying towards the distant Xuan Yue city. Even Mu Yungui didn't notice that a wisp of purple mist condensed into a drop of dew and fell into the fallen mountain range. The tremors below ended as part of the mountain range broke apart, but many monsters were still in shock. Of course, there are exceptions. A night shadow wolf lazily strolled through the mountains, taking advantage of the tremors that caused its cowardly prey to flee, and had a good feast. However, this night shadow wolf had droopy eyes and looked lifeless. Fortunately, it found food. A wisteria snake was crushed in half by a boulder rolling down the mountain and died. Nightshade wolf looked around and then pried open the boulder with all its might. Inside, several newly hatched wisteria snake cubs were huddled together, trembling. It seems the mother snake was protecting her young. Night Shadow Wolf looked at the monster before him, yet he seemed somewhat conflicted. However, after a moment, it opened its mouth wide and swallowed the snake heart containing the demonic power of the mother snake, and also bit and killed all the small snakes. To prevent future troubles, I'm a demon too, so why do I have a sense of morality? Is it because I've been living with humans for too long? Night Shadow Wolf consoled himself. Having no answer, Nightshade Wolf finished eating and prepared to go back to sleep. Just as he was about to leave, a drop of purple rain fell into the only unhatched egg in the snake's nest. It was a dead egg. The Nightshade Wolf found no sign of life inside, so the Nightshade Wolf kept it. As purple raindrops fell on the egg, a purple aura enveloped it, then disappeared, seemingly merging into the egg. The Nightshade Wolf recognized the aura, so it took a few steps back, sensing something ominous. Sure enough, as it expected, a wisteria snake hatched and looked at it with some confusion. A moment later, the little snake's bewildered look disappeared, replaced by a hint of expectation in its purple pupils as it gazed at the sky. The little white worm perched on the back of the Nightshade Wolf's head had an uncertain expression on its face. Chapter 30 Rest. The usually bustling fields were deserted, appearing rather empty at this moment. The villagers who were working in the fields earlier fled home in panic after hearing a terrifying sound coming from the distant mountains. Although upon closer reflection, if something were to happen to that 10,000-meter high mountain, how could an ordinary person escape? But something still needs to be done. Fortunately, not long after the villagers returned to their village, streaks of light flashed across the sky. This village is actually the closest to the Meteor Dragon mountain range. The cultivators who slay demons would often rest in the tea village for a while, and over time the villagers learned that the immortals mentioned in the book really existed. Seeing the cultivators streaking across the sky like shooting stars, the villagers felt somewhat relieved, but still dared not go out. Sunlight shimmered on the river and a gentle breeze carried a slight coolness. A boy and a girl walked along the riverbank. Their hair was slightly damp, but it was midday, the sun was shining brightly, and they didn't mind. After you threw them from 10,000 meters in the air, Mu Yungui could only control his obsession, making it glide through the air like a kite. Finally, they chose a stream as their landing point, and although they were somewhat disheveled, they were fortunate enough to successfully leave the Meteor Dragon Mountains. As you travel along the river, the scenery on both banks is breathtaking, with lush green trees and the sounds of birds and the fragrance of flowers. Mu Yungui said, "Finally, that strange remnant soul dissipated within the fallen Dragon Mountains." As Jiang Ryuachin listened to Mu Yungui slowly recount what had happened to him in the sword, it was as if she had been watching a wonderful storytelling performance. The girl perked up and smiled, saying, "Master even killed the gods from before, that's amazing." Just a moment later, Jiang Ryuachin yawned, looking somewhat tired. Seeing this, Mu Yungui remembered something and asked, "By the way, how long has it been since I entered the sword?" "Master has been inside for 2 days and 2 nights. After saying that, Mu Yungui realized that the girl had been guarding him for 2 days and 2 nights without closing her eyes, which was why she was so drowsy. "Let's find a place to rest." Mu Yungui led the girl as they continued walking towards the village in the distance. After a while, ponds filled with lotus leaves began to appear one after another along the riverbank. As I walked under a tree, sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground, creating a beautiful scene. Several stone benches were placed under the tree, but no one was resting there at the moment. "Ryuachin, shall we rest here for a while?" Mu Yungui asked softly. Whatever you say, master." At this moment, the girl's eyes were almost closed, and she nodded sleepily, answering in a daze. The master and apprentice sat together on a stone bench under the tree, leaning against the trunk, feeling the gentle breeze on their faces, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of the moment. The girl soon drifted off to sleep, leaning against Mu Yungui, her breathing even in her sleep. Since the spatial ring wasn't of a high enough grade to contain his obsession, Mu Yungui simply applied a talisman to conceal his aura, wrapped it in a piece of black cloth, and tossed it aside. He didn't have time to find a scabbard for his sword, so he had to make do with what he had. At this moment, several streaks of light flashed across the sky and flew towards the Meteor Dragon mountain range. Mu Yun smiled and then took a short rest. Eastern Continent, Taixuan Sword Sect Martial Arts Arena. On the jade-paved martial arts stage, a man and a woman stood in the arena, surrounded by young disciples on the viewing platforms, and even a few elders from the sect stopped to watch. On a viewing platform, a young man carrying a sword watched as the two fighters on the platform had already exchanged hundreds of blows in a short period of time inside. Senior brother Zhang is only in his early 20s, right? He already entered the Golden Core stage not long ago. That's terrifying. The Holy Maiden probably wouldn't be a match for him, would she? However, the Holy Maiden is, after all, the daughter of a sect and possesses a divine body and holy eyes. She cannot be viewed as an ordinary genius. Beside him, a slightly older disciple rolled his eyes and muttered a complaint. Ordinary genius. What kind of word is that? But when used to describe the Holy Maiden, she is a genius among geniuses. This is someone capable of suppressing even the most outstanding talents in the central continent. Since it was the Saintess who issued the challenge, perhaps she really is confident. On the martial arts stage, Shen Qinghan wore a pure white robe with flowing colors, its sleeves fluttering in the wind, making her appear as pure and ethereal as a blooming snow lotus. Her skirt danced like flowing clouds, graceful and elegant. Especially striking were her long, straight legs, cleverly concealed by the exquisite gauze skirt, appearing and disappearing, further enhancing her breathtaking beauty. "Go ahead and make your move, there's no need to hold back," Shen Qinghan said softly, her voice clear and melodious like heavenly music. She slightly raised her head, her gaze as clear as water. "In that case, junior sister, you'd better be careful." A long-haired man in a white open front shirt across from her lowered his gaze and exhaled a long breath, saying, "I won't hold back." Zhang Chen was somewhat annoyed. He had broken through to the Golden Core stage a few days ago, greatly increasing his strength, and he felt he should be able to easily defeat this junior sister who had always been a level lower than him. However, every time he sparred with her, he was always at a disadvantage, and this time was no exception. Ultimately, there are differences even among geniuses. Are we not going to lose again? Thinking of this, Zhang Chen broke out in a cold sweat. He pondered a solution in his mind and finally made up his mind. "I can only win by using spiritual energy. This is something that sword skills can't make up for. Junior sister Shen, please don't blame me." Zhang Chen muttered to himself as spiritual energy swirled around him. As he finished speaking, the longsword in his hand began to hum, as if responding to his call. Immediately afterwards, a powerful sword aura surged from the blade, sweeping over like a blue whirlwind. "This time it's my turn to win." A look of determination and confidence flashed in Zhang Chen's eyes. He poured all his spiritual energy into this sword strike, trying to suppress Shen Qinghan with absolute power. Meanwhile, the crowd below the stage also felt the power of Zhang Chen's sword strike. They were all amazed, their eyes fixed on the two on the stage, anticipating the outcome of the duel. "Look, senior brother Zhang is about to use his most powerful Azure Frost sword technique. The Holy Maiden shouldn't be able to withstand the overwhelming sword energy of a golden core cultivator. It seems senior brother Zhang is finally going to win," the sword-wielding youth shouted excitedly, as if he could already see Zhang Chen's victory. The slightly older boy next to him said, "I originally thought the Holy Maiden wouldn't be able to win, but after you said that, for some reason, I have a feeling there will definitely be a reversal." Another female cultivator watching the battle chimed in. Yes, this involves the Great Tao, and it might change the predetermined outcome." The sword-wielding youth was skeptical, so he patted his chest and confidently declared, "How could that be? Senior brother Zhang, with his golden core cultivation, how could he possibly lose using the Azure Frost sword technique? If he did lose, I'd just eat all the useless pills refined by Dan Peak." The older boy and girl beside them exchanged a smile and speculated in unison. "I think the Holy Maiden is safe." "Yes, me too." Chapter 31 Sparring. Shen Qinghan stood opposite Zhang Chen without making any move, simply watching him quietly as he gathered that hurricane-like sword energy. Seeing this, Zhang Chen felt a surge of anger, and his sword aura became even more fierce, as if the entire training ground was shrouded in a powerful force. However, at this moment, Shen Qinghan finally moved. Her holy eyes, which she had not used since the start of the battle, suddenly shone with dazzling golden light, and a godlike gaze was fixed on Zhang Chen. "Damn it!" Zhang Chen was startled. His Dao heart stirred slightly, and his sword technique tilted slightly, affecting his originally fierce attack. But by then, the die was cast and could not be cast. Slash! With a roar, Zhang Chen's flying sword, wrapped in hurricane-like sword energy, shot out like a meteor, bringing with it a gust of wind and even lifting the white floor tiles on the training ground. Faced with this attack, Shen Qinghan did not choose to take it head-on. She swiftly dodged the hurricane, avoiding most of the attack. However, the sharp sword energy still managed to leave a small, delicate wound on her beautiful face. But Shen Qinghan didn't seem to care about the injury. With a flick of his longsword, he instantly appeared beside Zhang Chen and thrust it towards his neck without hesitation. The frost-white, silvery-white sword tip pierced the flesh, carrying a chilling sensation. Seeing this, Zhang Chen felt his heart pound with fear, but his body had no time to react. At the critical moment when the body was about to be severed, he could only hurriedly say, "Junior sister Shen, I admit defeat." After saying that, Shen Qinghan slowly put away the long sword that had pierced Zhang Chen's neck. Then, with a gentle wave of her hand, the wound on her cheek instantly healed as if she had never been injured, a perfection that was astonishing. However, none of this brought her joy or pride. On the contrary, her gaze became even colder and more distant. "I'm thinking about some unpleasant things." At the same time, Zhang Chen swallowed hard, tightly clutching his bleeding wound, and stared in horror at the saintess before him whose eyes were devoid of any emotion. He could sense that if he didn't stop her in time, she might kill him without hesitation. Although it was just a friendly spar, for some reason, he genuinely felt the aura of death enveloping him. Shen Qinghan glanced coldly at the frost and snow sword in her hand, as if disgusted by the blood stained on it. She gently flicked the blood off the sword, her movements elegant yet ruthless. Although her face and expression didn't change much, her coldness and decisiveness sent chills down one's spine. "If you were fighting outside, you would already be dead. I hope you'll be stronger next time." After saying that, Shen Qinghan turned around and flew away on his sword, leaving Zhang Chen behind with a sense of shame and fear. Meanwhile, the disciples watching the battle erupted in a huge cheer. Their eyes gleamed with excitement and anticipation as they discussed the fight that had just taken place. "I never expected that she could defeat senior brother Zhang Chen so easily, as expected of the Holy Maiden. So the Holy Maiden is invincible among those of the same realm." This made the whole scene exceptionally lively. The slightly older boy patted the shoulder of the sword-wielding boy, who was still unwilling to accept the reality, and gently reminded him, Oh, right, remember to go to Dan Feng to eat the useless pills. My junior sister and I will go with you. Since they met, both of them had been on edge. Now, whether it was because they were physically and mentally exhausted or because they were far away from the place where monsters roamed, they slept very peacefully under the tree. When Mu Yungui opened his eyes again, it was already evening. Only a faint neon light remained on the horizon, but it would soon be swallowed up by the night. Master. Before long, the girl in his arms also woke up. She opened her eyes sleepily, looked up at Mu Yungui, and then snuggled closer to him, seemingly not fully awake yet. Mu Yungui looked down at the girl in his arms. Her hair was a little messy, her cheeks were slightly red from being pressed against him for so long, and her lips were slightly pouting, making her look very cute. It's okay to sleep a little longer. Encountering and slaying demons in the Meteor Dragon Mountains, then encountering humans and retaliating. The girl's nerves had been stretched to the limit these past few days. Now, reflecting on it carefully, it seemed that her role as a master might have been far too unprofessional. Dad, he really is a human being. It wasn't until a clear, melodious sound, like a silver bell, came from afar that the two were brought back from their daze. The two stood up, and only then did the girl realize that she had lost her composure in front of her master. They looked in the direction of the sound and saw a burly man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s leading a donkey cart half loaded with timber. A short-haired girl was sitting on the cart. The short-haired girl was about the same age as the two men. As the donkey cart drew closer, she lightly jumped off and ran to them like a lively rabbit. Mu Yungui examined it carefully. The short-haired girl wore a short-sleeved shirt, her skin tanned a bit wheatish, and her trousers were rolled up at the cuffs. Her short hair perked up playfully, swaying gently with her movements, making her look exceptionally lively. She watched Mu Yungui and the other girl curiously, filled with interest. Who are you? It's almost night. Why are you still wandering around in this desolate place? Although immortal masters often come to the Meteor Dragon Mountain range to kill demons, accidents are bound to happen because of the close proximity. But judging from your appearance, you don't seem to be villagers from the neighborhood. Are you here to visit relatives or to escape disaster? But you're really good-looking, young man, and the girl next to you is too. You must be someone special, right? Could it be that, as in those stories, the young master of a family dislikes the woman he is not yet engaged to, so he elopes with his childhood sweetheart? And so I accidentally ended up. Before either of them could speak, the short-haired girl began to talk at length on her own. This was the first time Mu Yungui had ever met such an enthusiastic girl, and he didn't even know how to start a conversation. Fortunately, at this moment, the driver got out of the car, stood behind the girl, put two fingers together, and gently tapped the girl's head, interrupting the short-haired girl with a crisp sound. The short-haired girl covered her head and looked at the man with a melancholy expression. The man wiped his sweat with the cloth draped over his shoulder, then spoke. Sorry, that's just how my feminine personality is. Please forgive me for always speaking so inappropriately. It's all right, the girl is quite quirky and adorable. Mu Yungui smoothed things over. Chapter 32, Elder Brother. The man chuckled awkwardly, but his expression quickly turned serious. However, we don't know what caused that deafening roar in the Dragonfall Mountains today. Although we saw streaks of light flying across the sky, suggesting that some immortal masters have already gone there, it's still possible that some demons took advantage of the chaos to descend the mountain. Besides, it's already dark, so we'd better leave this place. There might still be danger. If I hadn't been worried about rain and wanted to bring the timber I'd cut down a few days ago home, I wouldn't have risked going out. In short, it's still very dangerous. Let's get out of here quickly, the burly man driving kindly advised. Before the driver could finish speaking, Mu Yungui suddenly made a sword gesture, and the sword energy of obsession burst forth from his feet, tearing the black cloth apart and shooting out into the air. It left a white trail in the dim space and flew towards a grove of trees behind him. Then, there was a sound of a sword cutting through flesh, and obsession flew back to the four of them, but with a snake head the size of a bowl hanging from the tip of the sword. Even after losing its body, the snake's head still opened its gaping maw, trying to bite something, and continued to struggle, appearing ferocious and terrifying. The demon's blood dripped in front of them, filling the air with a foul, bloody stench. The man and the short-haired girl were so shocked by what they saw that their mouths gaped open, and they were speechless for a moment. Yes, there is indeed danger. They might have been following you all along the way. He chopped the still-dead snake head in half, wiped the demon blood off the sword with a black cloth, and sighed. The obsession of the immortal sword was too high grade, and an ordinary spatial ring could not bear it. At this moment, he could only take out another piece of black cloth as a scabbard and use a talisman to suppress the overflowing sword energy. If a suitable scabbard isn't found, a piece of black cloth will be lost every time a sword is used. Bearing his obsession on his back once more, Mu Yungui smiled as he looked at the two people's astonished expressions and said, "But don't worry, we've already thoroughly searched the area, and there's no danger nearby now." The man still seemed a little unsure of what was going on, so he cautiously asked, "Young man, are you a celestial master from the mountain?" "Doesn't it seem like it?" Mu Yungui asked in return. "No, I just thought you two were too young. I didn't expect you to be immortal masters." Actually, you can't blame the burly man driving the car. After all, this place is quite remote compared to other areas, and immortals are not something you can see often. Given that this place is near the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range, the number of cultivators the man has seen who come here to slay demons and stop to prepare in the tea village is very limited. Moreover, most people would only stop and glance at it from afar, not daring to be too curious. Untouched by worldly affairs, looking down from above and utterly untainted, that is the impression men have of immortals. Most importantly, compared to those ancient and otherworldly cultivators, the two people in front of them were simply too young. Moreover, the boy was dressed in a simple black shirt, quite ordinary, as was the girl beside him. Although her clothes were slightly more refined than the boy's, neither of them seemed to possess any otherworldly air based solely on their attire. However, upon closer inspection, it takes on a different meaning. The boy is extremely handsome, but the girl seems. After a brief silence, the burly man driving the car came to his senses, still somewhat shaken. He quickly cupped his hands in thanks, saying, "Thank you so much for saving us, immortal master. If it weren't for you, my daughter and I would probably be dead here today." Mu Yungui waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be so polite, and then introduced himself. "My name is Mu Yungui. I am not really a mountain immortal master. I just had some good fortune, but it is nothing special. We were preparing to head to Jiangyu City with my younger sister, and we rested here for a while along the way." He originally wanted to clarify their relationship, but remembering the short-haired girl's speculation at the time, he changed his mind. "Sister," Jiang Ryuachen's initial drowsiness was instantly replaced by shyness. A blush spread across her fair face, and she looked up at Mu Yungui with some nervousness and confusion in her eyes. She could only speak in her mind. "Master, isn't this a bit disrespectful to your teacher?" However, it was already late, and the two people in front of them did not notice the girl's reaction. However, Mu Yungui noticed and looked at Jiang Ryuachen, who seemed a little lost. He found her extremely cute, with expressions he had never seen in his previous life. If he could, Mu Yungui would like to see more of the girl's expressions. Mu Yungui winked at Jiang Ryuachen, thinking to himself, saying it this way might help us get closer to her. "Really?" Jiang Ryuachen was a little confused. "Yes, of course, so why don't you call me Brother Ryuachen?" "Brother?" a soft, shy voice rang out. Upon hearing it, Mu Yungui couldn't help but smile, as if some strange attribute had awakened within him. Immortal master." The short-haired girl was somewhat surprised and lost her initial liveliness. She began to recall what she had just said and became a little flustered. Had what she just said offended the other party? The short-haired girl was extremely nervous at this moment. Upon seeing this, Mu Yungui smiled faintly. "In other words, I've gained some transcendent power. In the end, I still consider myself human, so there's no need to be so restrained. I won't eat people like this monster." Jiang Ryuachen quickly chimed in, "I don't know either." Mu Yungui said, "Actually, we do need a place to rest. Is there an inn in the village ahead?" As he spoke, he looked at the village in front of him. The man was a little embarrassed after hearing this, and quickly replied, "The place ahead is a small village called Tea Village. My daughter and I also live here. However, there are no inns in this remote area. If you want a rest, immortal master, I will go back and discuss with the village chief to make room for you two to stay temporarily." Mu Yungui smiled slightly, waved his hand, and said gently, no need, it's just for the night. One room is enough. No need to make such a fuss." At this moment, the short-haired girl suddenly spoke up. "I have a spare room in my house. I wonder if the immortal master would be willing to." Upon hearing his daughter's words, the man remembered his family's limited resources and feared that this might displease the immortal master, so he hesitated to speak. Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui immediately clasped his hands in a gesture of respect and said, "Thank you both for your trouble. Then, can my sister and I ride in this carriage?" Yes, of course." After saying that, Mu Yungui led Jiang Ryuachen and the other person to sit on the horse, carriage made of half a piece of wood. Then they walked toward the village in the distance, which was already beginning to light up. The three people in the carriage had different expressions. The short-haired girl glanced cautiously at Mu Yungui, who was smiling, and hesitated, as if she wanted to say something but then hesitated. After a brief moment of thought, she cautiously spoke. "Immortal Master, you don't still remember what I said before, do you?" Mu Yungui said, "It's all right." "Really? Real? I'm not the kind of ruthless killer who doesn't blink an eye." After explaining, Mu Yungui muttered to himself, "The reputation of cultivators here is quite strange." Having received an affirmative answer, the short-haired girl smiled again and became curious once more. "Then, Immortal Master, can you fly and teleport? Do immortals eat? Can immortals really move mountains and overturn seas? And does the sea to the east have any edge? I've heard there's a giant fish called Kun in there as big as a city and it can fly. Is that true? It's so big, how long can it last?" Chapter 33, Sword Box. The journey home with the driver and the short-haired girl wasn't boring at all. They chatted as they traveled, and soon they were nearing the tea village. Mu Yungui glanced at it briefly and saw that it wasn't very big, with only about 50 or 60 households. The short-haired girl was named Chen Kinger. When she met Mu Yungui, he wasn't as unapproachable as some so-called immortals. He was just like a friendly older brother next door. So the girl asked many questions that interested cultivators, but she didn't forget to introduce herself. Mu Yungui didn't dislike this energetic girl. In fact, he preferred the short-haired girl's straightforward and lively personality when he interacted with her after he transmigrated to this world. The incident with the cultivators she had encountered in the Meteor Dragon Mountains served as a lesson for Jiang Ruochen, so she remained somewhat wary of this short-haired girl who was clinging to her master. However, Jiang Ruochen was also very interested in Chen Kinger's bizarre and unbelievable questions, so she sat upright, while being wary of whether the other party had any bad intentions, and listened curiously. Mu Yungui found his adorable little apprentice quite cute, so he let Chen Kinger ask the questions she asked. Chen Kinger asked, and Mu Yungui answered. Chen Kinger asked about the customs, traditions, and strange sights of each continent, as well as the rumors and legends she had heard from the storyteller. At this moment, Mu Yungui had become a storyteller himself. The journey was neither far nor near, taking about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, when the donkey brayed and stopped, and the three of them got off the cart. Before them was a small courtyard. Although it didn't look very spacious, it was clean and tidy. As the group entered, many wooden items came into view. From large items like ox-drawn plows used in early spring to small items like benches, wooden furniture, and even hunting crossbows and bows and arrows. Everything looked quite exquisite. "Uncle Chen, it turns out you were the one who had been hiding your true abilities all along." Mu Yungui approached and examined an unfinished folding fan. The fan ribs were made of jade bamboo, with delicate patterns lightly engraved on them. The small ribs were evenly thin and looked very eye-catching. Although Mu Yungui didn't understand these refined items very well, he could still tell that they were of exceptional quality. This seemingly honest-looking uncle is not to be underestimated. His skills are truly remarkable. Chenmo chuckled sheepishly. "I'm just a good-for-nothing carpenter. I have some decent skills that allow me to take on some jobs in nearby towns to support Kinger and me." Mu Yungui felt that he was being modest. The skill was indeed excellent, but he didn't say anything. As he entered the living room, he glanced up and saw a wooden carving on the table in front of him. It was a lifelike woman who looked 9/10 like Chen Kinger, but it hadn't been painted yet. Mu Yungui understood what was going on and didn't mention it. After chatting, Chen Mo went down to the kitchen, and Jiang Ruochen followed Chen Kinger to tidy up the room, leaving Mu Yungui in the living room. The father and daughter were very hospitable, bringing out the best of their home when they met guests, especially since the guests were their saviors. The young man and woman were not pretentious either, so they followed suit and had dinner together. After several conversations, they became quite familiar with each other. After the meal, Mu Yungui remembered that he still hadn't found the sword sheath, so he said to Chen Mo, "Uncle Chen, I have some materials on hand. I wonder if you can help me get them out according to my requirements." "Well, it's possible if it's not too difficult, but I'll have to take a look at the specifics first." Chen Mo didn't dare to make a guarantee in front of the cultivators, so he prepared to conduct an assessment first. The spatial ring in Mu Yungui's hand lit up, and a piece of wood more than 3 feet long appeared in his hand. The wood is a deep, dark color, as if it has been dyed by the night, but it gradually turns white at the base, as if a layer of ink of varying shades has been slowly spread on white paper, creating distinct layers. There is an ancient and simple atmosphere that subtly flows through it, giving people a sense of the passage of time. Although cloudwood is not a top-grade precious wood, Mu Yungui searched for it for a long time in Giant Chi's ring, and finally found that this wood was most suitable for making a sword case. Although he felt some regret at not being able to find higher-grade materials, the current cloudwood was sufficient to meet his needs. Chenmo circled the cloud-patterned wood carefully, his eyes sparkling with curiosity and amazement. He meticulously observed the wood's texture, color, and its mysterious, ancient aura, and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. "This is cloudwood. I wonder if you could use it to make a sword case for me," Mu Yungui explained. "It's not a scabbard, but a sword case," Mu Yungui added. The main problem is that his obsession is too conspicuous. If he can prevent his obsession from being drawn in a normal battle, it would be best not to show this sword to the world. The girl beside him has already experienced the principle that a common man is innocent, but possessing a treasure is a crime. Before he has absolute strength, Mu Yungui decides to develop his strength in a lowly manner. "If this immortal material can be cut, it will take about 2 days," Chenmo replied after a moment's thought. "I have the means, Uncle Chen, just go ahead and do it." After saying that, Mu Yungui took out a few gold leaves and handed them to Chenmo. "I'll take care of your meals and lodging, and I'd also like to trouble you to make me a sword case. Please accept these, Uncle Chen. I'll also give you any leftover scraps of that cloudwood." "No need, Zyro Mu, this is too precious, I can't accept it," Zhang Chenmo declined. "Just accept it. Besides, Uncle Chen, your craftsmanship is exceptional. Even in a fairy shop, it would be a rare find. The reward I'm giving you is far from enough to justify the price of your skill." "Well, all right." Chenmo had no choice but to accept the reward from Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui clasped his hands in a gesture of respect and said, "Well, if possible, I'll have to bother you for another 2 days." "Haha, it's all right. If you and your sister Zyro Mu want to stay, you can stay as long as you like," Chenmo said with a smile. If Mu Yungui had chosen not to get involved in the karma of his past life, he might have stayed in the tea village for a long time. However, now that the former demonic sect Empress had become his disciple, he had also taken on some missions. Just for the sake of Jiang Ryuachin and his past life's grudge, there was nothing more to say, so he politely declined Chen Mo's offer. Chapter 34, Certain Feelings. Compared to sitting in the mountains and cultivating in seclusion, life or death battles will allow one to improve their realm much faster. However, one must also consolidate one's foundation after those battles and fill in any gaps or deficiencies. Otherwise, an unstable foundation can easily lead to problems. Mu Yungui understood this well, so he decided to give the girl some time to properly digest the results of this battle. After all, only by integrating these experiences and insights into her own cultivation could she truly improve her strength. After chatting for a while and agreeing on the requirements for the sword box, it was already late at night, and the Chen father and daughter had gone to sleep. Inside the room, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin sat on the bed, closing their eyes to rest and check and stabilize their physical condition after the intense battles of the past few days. Mu Yungui examined his body internally and found that the sword energy in his acupoints was abundant, and the spiritual energy in his danshin was also approaching its peak. However, he had not yet been able to recover his already depleted foundation. However, his divine sense was even stronger than before. Slaying the golden dragon with his sword amidst his obsession further enhanced his already powerful divine sense. Now you can try to cultivate some techniques for attacking with spiritual sense. But when he saw the immortal sword in his hand, he decided to start by forging the sword. After all, for a sword cultivator, forging the sword, their lifeblood, is the best option. Beside him, Jiang Ryuachin radiated a golden light that surrounded her, and her inner energy gradually stabilized and became more restrained. "She's already at the 9th level of Qi refining." Mu Yungui could tell the girl's current level at a glance. After several days of fighting demons, essentially in a constant state of combat, the girl's cultivation level broke through 2 layers thanks to her exceptionally high talent and comprehension, coupled with the powerful cultivation speed granted by the heavenly evolution divine heart. Her aura was very stable, showing no signs of weakness, demonstrating a truly steady and methodical approach. Noticing Mu Yungui's gaze on her, Jiang Ryuachin slowly stopped circulating the Heavenly Evolution Heart Sutra. The girl's pretty face showed a hint of confusion. "Master, is there a problem with my cultivation?" Mu Yungui spoke gently, stroking the girl's hair affectionately. "No, Ryuachin did very well. Master is very satisfied." Jiang Ryuachin knew that her master had always been very gentle, from the moment he met her, and in all aspects of her cultivation and life afterward, he was always so gentle. At this moment, her master's gentleness stirred up an indescribable feeling in the girl, which she didn't quite understand. However, Jiang Ryuachin still voiced her thoughts. Ryuachin wants to help master, whether it's revenge or anything else, so I will continue to work hard to improve my cultivation. If we encounter that situation again, master, please don't go alone, okay? Mu Yungui rubbed his face, somewhat hesitant to meet the girl's earnest gaze, and simply made a gesture. Maybe I'll have to rely on Ryuachin in the future, Tilda. Ryuachin, don't get too cocky, okay? But after saying that, Mu Yungui felt a little regretful. Looking into the girl's eyes, he said with certainty, Ryuachin, you actually did very well. It was I who was strict with you from the very beginning. After listening, Jiang Ryuachin shook her head and smiled slightly. I don't think so. Meeting my master is already a great blessing. Mu Yungui patted the girl's head. Is there anything Ryuachin wants? I will try my best to fulfill it. Go to Jiangyu City and buy all the dresses in that shop for my Ryuachin. Jiang Ryuachin was deep in thought. However, the girl seemed to have thought of something and suddenly blushed. Then, Master, can you hug me? I feel safe here. The girl pointed to her heart. Chapter 35, Protecting One's Own. The Chen family father and daughter got up very early. Before dawn, a rooster's crow broke the tranquility of the village, and the whole village began to slowly awaken. After the group had a simple breakfast, a sliver of dawn gradually appeared on the horizon. Although the cloudwood was not of high grade, it was still far from being enough to process with ordinary carving tools. Mu Yungui used his own sword energy to imbue Chen Mo's tools with a layer of sword energy, and instructed him to be careful. Chen Mo had prepared the blueprints for the sword case last night. At this moment, he looked serious, but his eyes were shining with excitement because this might be the most precious work he had ever made, so he attached great importance to it. Mu Yungui yawned, tucked his hands into his sleeves, held his sword, and leaned lazily against the door, watching. Holding a carving knife, Chen Mo carefully carved across the cloud wood, the blade moving nimbly and gracefully like a swimming dragon. Soon, the general shape of the sword case gradually emerged. Indeed, professional matters should be left to professionals. Mu Yungui sighed as he looked at Chen Mo, whose expression and demeanor had completely changed. At this moment, Chen Mo seemed to have a different soul. His eyes became deep and sharp, and his expression became serious, making him completely different from the lovable, rough man he had been before. If this were a cultivator, it would be considered a state of enlightenment. Mu Yungui didn't disturb them. He held the immortal sword, which had already reached the minor refinement stage, and continued to temper it. Although the tea village is not very big, it is still some distance from the town, so there are general stores in the village. After getting up early, Chen Qinger took Jiang Ryuachin out to explore the tea village with the young girl. The girl wanted to refuse, but her brother said that work and rest should be balanced and encouraged her to go out for a walk, so she agreed to go out with Chen Qinger. Chen Qinger held Jiang Ryuachin's hand as they strolled together through the narrow, moss-covered alleyways. Jiang Ryuachin had lived in the Jiang family since childhood and had never stepped out of Suzhou. She was filled with curiosity and wonder at this quiet little village and couldn't help but look around. A crystal-clear stream, its bottom lined with pebbles, flows beside the village, its waters babbling melodiously. A small general store stands by the stream, its entrance displaying a few tempting pastries, though not many. These pastries are mostly for the village children and are relatively inexpensive. Besides pastries, the store also carries various daily necessities, making it convenient for villagers to buy things without having to travel to town. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. A gentle breeze brought a cool and refreshing scent. Jiang Ryuachin felt the peaceful atmosphere around her, and her mood gradually relaxed. Chen Qinger stepped forward to look at the pastries in the box, while Jiang Ryuachin stopped at the door, took a few steps back, and waited outside. Sister Ryuachin, aren't you going in to pick out some food? Chen Qinger turned around and asked, somewhat puzzled. No, I'm not very good at dealing with strangers, and my appearance might scare people. Jiang Ryuachin lowered her head slightly and said softly. Chen Qinger didn't know how to comfort her, but thought that buying some pastries for Jiang Ryuachin might make her feel better. At this moment, the two children who had just bought pastries came out of the grocery store and saw the horrifying wound on Jiang Ryuachin's face, so they cried out, "Ugly monster! That's terrifying! Hey, you two!" Chen Qinger rolled up her sleeves, trying to scare the two children away. The two children, meanwhile, were making faces at each other, seemingly quite pleased with themselves for provoking Chen Qinger. I'm sorry the children in the village are so outspoken, Chen Kinger said apologetically. It's all right, Sister Kinger. After all, any normal person would react this way. Having suffered countless hardships and discrimination in Suzhou, Jiang Ruochen didn't care much at the moment. Mu Yongui vanished and reappeared in the village. There was no old sword hanging under the stone bridge over the stream, and there were no reclusive masters or ancient demons sealed in the village. It seemed that not every place he went had some kind of opportunity that would lead him there. Mu Yongui took the opportunity to check around the tea village but found no demons, so he went to look for the two girls. I happened to witness that scene. Chen Kinger was about to start scolding them when she saw the two children turn and run away. Don't run. Just then, a gentle breeze blew by, carrying a hint of coolness. However, before Chen Kinger could chase after them, the two children suddenly lost their balance and were suspended in mid-air, as if an invisible hand had grabbed their collars tightly and then thrown them away. Accompanied by two terrified screams, the two children crashed into the nearby stream, splashing water everywhere. Because the stream wasn't deep, and the children in the countryside had learned to swim from a young age, they weren't injured. However, the incident happened suddenly, and they swallowed some cold water, making them look rather disheveled. Chen Kinger caught a glimpse of a figure in black in the distance and understood what was going on. She then said to the children below with a serious expression, "You don't know manners and speak ill of others. The gods in heaven heard you, so they threw you all into the river." The child believed it since he couldn't explain it, so he hurriedly ran ashore from the water, fearing that there might be divine punishment in the water. He climbed up, apologized to Jiang Ruochen, and then quickly left. Mu Yonggui's figure vanished, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared beside the two. "Brother, they're just children. There's no need to argue with them." Jiang Ruochen came to Mu Yonggui's side, her brows slightly furrowed, and said softly. She felt that Mu Yongui didn't need to bother with those children. After all, they were still young and didn't understand. "Ruochen, have you forgotten how old you are?" After hearing this, Mu Yongui gently pinched the girl's cheek and said softly, "Ruochen is only 14 years old. Does she have to be so sensible? That doesn't make sense. Ruochen should also have her own emotions and feelings, and shouldn't always suppress herself." Then Mu Yongui comforted her, saying, "If you have been wronged, your master will help you get revenge." He assured her that he would protect Jiang Ruochen and ensure she would not suffer any harm. Finally, Mu Yongui simply stopped spouting those so-called grand principles. "Actually, I'm just protecting my own. You must be feeling a little wronged, right?" Mu Yongui asked softly. He saw Jiang Ruochen with her head down and knew she might be feeling unwell. Although she appeared strong on the surface, she still had some vulnerable spots deep down. "Yes, I feel a little unwell, but only a little," Jiang Ruochen replied with a smile. She didn't want Mu Yongui to worry about her, so she tried to appear relaxed. But in reality, she did feel a little wronged and helpless. Mu Yongui gently held Jiang Ruochen's hand and said tenderly, "Don't worry, Ruochen. This is only temporary. Once you reach the golden core stage, you will regain your original appearance. At that time, you might become the fairy Jiang that all the cultivators of the eastern continent dream of." Jiang Ruochen took it as Mu Yongui comforting her, and then composed herself. However, Mu Yongui was not joking. In her previous life, the demon Empress was completely attacked by the righteous path, but in private, many people were even captivated by her enchanting and beautiful face. Chen Kinger simply ate her pastries while watching the two playfully bickering, and the pastries in her hand seemed to taste even sweeter. "What are you thinking about, Sister Kinger?" Jiang Ruochen asked when she saw Chen Kinger grinning at her. Aunt Chen Kinger laughed and said, "I saw an interesting scene." Jiang Ruochen didn't quite understand, so she pressed Chen Kinger for more information, but the other girl just rubbed her own face. Jiang Ruochen simply gave up asking. "Brother, this is osmanthus cake that Ruochen just bought. I don't know if you like it." Jiang Ruochen changed the subject, took out the cake wrapped in oil paper, and handed a piece to Mu Yongui. "Ruochen thinks her brother will like it," she couldn't help but say, recalling the elegant Mu Yongui in white robes from her strange memories. Upon hearing this, Mu Yonggui's expression changed slightly. "Ruochen, how did you know I like osmanthus cake?" Mu Yongui took a small step back, somewhat wary of his adorable disciple. Seeing this, Jiang Ruochen realized that Mu Yonggui's reaction was amiss, so she quickly waved her hand and said, "Ruochen just thinks Master might like it. If Master doesn't like it, Ruochen will return it immediately." Jiang Ruochen regretted provoking her master's emotions. As expected, those memories were not a good thing. "No, actually, I really like it. It's just that I was reminded of an old friend, and I felt a little dazed." Mu Yungui said, rubbing his forehead, realizing that he seemed to have lost his composure. Furthermore, if Jiang Ruochen regains her memories after her rebirth, then Shen Qinghen, who is also a woman of destiny, should also regain her memories, and she would have been killed long ago. So it's unlikely. Mu Yungui comforted himself in this way. Chapter 36, Leave a Pair of Chopsticks. Time flies, and 2 days have passed in the blink of an eye. It was early morning, and Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen were preparing to leave the tea village and head to the Immortal Ferry. Mu Yungui held the sword case that Chen Mo had made in his hand. The sword case is a long, angular shape, with its surface flowing like dark clouds, making it extremely unique. The border is outlined with delicate cloud patterns in gold thread, adding to its mysterious aura. Mu Yungui set up 4 talismans to conceal his aura, placing them in the upper left, upper right, lower left, and lower right corners of the sword box, forming a special array to suppress the overflow of the obsession sword chi. Uncle Chen, did you use all the gold leaves I gave you on this? Mu Yungui asked helplessly, rubbing his forehead. Uncle Chen simply chuckled and replied, Little Mu, the materials you gave me were far too precious. I felt it wouldn't be appropriate to use ordinary things to embellish them. After thinking about it, this was all I had, so I had the gold leaf made into gold thread and engraved it on the sword case. However, even gold seems insignificant in front of this sword box. Uncle Chen sighed. Mu Yungui gently stroked the sword case, feeling its unique texture and the power it contained. He slung the sword case back over his shoulder and then said earnestly to Uncle Chen, To me, this is precious enough. Thank you, Uncle Chen. Nearby, Chen Qinger and Jiang Ruochen were talking. Although they had only spent 2 days together, Chen Qinger still liked this well-behaved younger sister very much and was always a little reluctant to part with her. It was just a pity that they were not on the same path. Chen Qinger took out 2 masks and handed them to the brother and sister in front of her. Brother Mu, Sister Ruochen, these are made from cloud wood. I found that this treasure can be transparent in one direction after being thinned, so I simply made 2 masks. Her eyes gleamed with anticipation, as if hoping the brother and sister would like the gift. In her hands were 2 masks. One depicted a fierce and menacing shaman, the other a seductive fox-like face, a half-smile that seemed to bewitch souls. Both masks were made of ink wash painting material. The father and daughter had used all the remaining materials, leaving none for themselves. Chen Qinger looked at the brother and sister and said softly, What father said? The immortals who go up the mountain aren't as good as we imagine. In fact, most of them are just pretending to be respectable people. For the sake of immortality and opportunities, they engage in deceit and treachery. It's full of filth, not even as good as Tea Village. A hint of disappointment flickered in her eyes, as if she had lost faith in those so-called immortals. Then she added, Is the mountain really not as good as Brother Yungui described? Her voice trailed off. I just wanted to make a mask for Brother Yungui and Sister Ryu Chan so they could protect themselves and not be targeted by bad people. Chen Qinger's gaze was firm yet gentle. She hoped that through these 2 masks, they could better hide themselves and avoid being harmed. Mu Yungui took the mask and said, What you said is indeed true. But Ruochen and I have things we must do. However, thank you for the mask, Qinger. Mu Yungui originally thought that the man in front of him was just skilled in martial arts, but he didn't expect that Chen Mo would know something about going up the mountain. However, since he had no cultivation level, Mu Yungui could only guess that he was the woman in the sculpture in front of the hall, Chen Qinger's mother. However, Mu Yungui could understand why the other party chose not to tell him, since everyone has secrets. As long as you know the other person is good to you, that's enough. Since that's the case, then I'll have to show you what I'm capable of, Mu Yungui said, rolling up his sleeve. Instantly, a blank talisman appeared in his hand. He tossed the talisman into the air, flicked it lightly with his finger, and a drop of blood essence slid from his fingertip, landing on the talisman and forming a mysterious pattern. This pattern shimmered with a faint light and flew into the Chen family's courtyard. The talisman vanished as soon as it entered the courtyard, as if it had merged into the air. Just then, some inconspicuous insects began to emerge from various corners of the previously quiet courtyard. These insects seemed to be affected by something, and they all died. Their corpses were scattered on the ground. Uncle Chen, if you encounter any difficulties, remove that talisman. The map points to a celestial sect. With your skills, you're sure to be able to help. Chen Mo remained silent, lost in thought. Goodbye, Sister Qinger. Jiang Ruochen waved goodbye to Chen Qinger. Chen Mo said, Zyro Mu, the chopsticks are still here. You can come again when you have time. Brother Yungui, please take good care of Sister Ryu Chan. Mu Yungui didn't turn around, but instead raised his hand and waved. Next time we meet, Ryuachin and I might be famous all over the world. The eastern continent is actually very large, but most of it is the vast ocean to the east, and no cultivator has yet reached the end of the eastern sea. Even the Pinglai Pavilion, the top sect in the eastern continent, has only built a giant pavilion the size of a city not far from the sea. After the young man and woman left the tea village, they traveled north along a river by passenger boat. After half a day of travel, it took them more than 2 days to finally see the two large characters on the tall city wall, Jiangyue, River Moon. Luckily, the immortal ferry isn't too far from Jiangyu City, otherwise we'd be running ourselves ragged, Mu Yungui complained to the girl beside him. Without a certain level of cultivation, it's really too troublesome to quickly get to a certain place. However, Jiang Ryuachin, who had never traveled far before, felt that the two of them were already moving very fast. They had left Sioux City, crossed the Meteor Dragon mountain range, and passed through 4 or 5 cities, almost reaching the northern part of the Longyuan dynasty. The girl had never imagined that she could travel so far one day. Mu Yungui smiled and said, "When Ryuachin grows up, she will understand. In fact, this world is just like this. After the strongest expert, it only takes a few days to travel from the southern marsh to the northern border. The devouring demons in the west, the forest of 10,000 demons in the north, and the boundless sea in the east. You'll find that you're not free once you get to a higher position. It's like being born in a cage, with the sides and the top completely sealed off." At the city gate, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin used concealment magic together, covering their faces with masks, and entered the city, which was much larger than Sioux City. Having been here before, Mu Yungui, relying on his memory, walked into the alley next to it, and after several twists and turns, arrived at a wine shop deep in the alley. Although it was daytime, the shop entrance was somewhat dimly lit due to its location in a deep alley. The surroundings were quiet, with only the aroma of wine lingering in the air. Mu Yungui lifted the curtain and walked in, saying directly, "Shopkeeper, a map, please." After saying that, there was a brief silence. Seeing no response, Mu Yungui took out a thunder talisman to activate it. Hey, fellow Taoist, please stop. Why aren't you following the rules?" A melodious voice hurriedly spoke up. Password. A young girl ran out of the shop and snatched the charged talisman from Mu Yungui's hand. It seemed too hot to handle, so she quickly threw it on the ground and kicked it a few times. After doing all this, the girl sighed and looked at the two people of unknown origin. 2 living fathers arrived. Chapter 30, 7,000 Words Tower. "We're in a hurry, how many spirit stones per share?" Mu Yungui asked directly without mincing words. It's better to know some information beforehand if you want to go to that immortal ascension secret realm. After all, at this time in my previous life, I had just entered the Tai Xuan sword sect and hadn't even started cultivating yet. Oh my 2 young friends, wearing masks makes us feel a bit distant. A young girl dressed in a light red silk robe and with her hair in a high ponytail walked gracefully towards them, a friendly smile on her face. Her gaze swept back and forth between the two of them, as if trying to see their true faces through their masks. Mu Yungui frowned slightly but quickly regained his composure. He looked at the girl and said calmly, "Your sect's rules haven't changed. You're always so curious about your guests' privacy." Jiang Ryuachin looked at all this with some confusion, and Mu Yungui explained to her. This wine shop is actually a stronghold of a sect called Kainyu Tower. They specialize in collecting all kinds of intelligence. As long as you have enough spirit stones, you can buy all kinds of secrets and information from the mountains here. When hiking in the mountains, it's always good to learn more. Upon hearing this explanation, Jiang Ryuachin nodded in sudden understanding. She hadn't expected that such a mysterious secret was hidden behind this seemingly ordinary wine shop. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, the shopkeeper girl snorted and confidently speculated. The 2 guests looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. The young master must be carrying some very high-grade swords on his back. The one behind me must be a cute little girl, right? The shopkeeper glanced at Mu Yungui again, a sly smile flashing in her eyes, and said softly, "These 2 guests seem to have extraordinary bearing. Hey, Tilda." After saying that, the shopkeeper winked her right eye at Mu Yungui, making a cute face. Seeing this, Jiang Ryuachin retreated behind Mu Yungui, carefully clutching the hem of Mu Yungui's clothes, trying her best not to let this person from Kainulu see any more of her secrets. Mu Yungui patted Jiang Ryuachin's head to indicate that she didn't need to worry, and then said, "The 100 words token at your waist is a token of core membership within the 1,000 words pavilion. Its presence here might indicate that the Thousand Words Pavilion is planning something in the eastern continent. Someone like you should be a prodigy from the main building in the central continent. After saying that, Mu Yungui continued. Moreover, the shopkeeper looks like he's about to enter the Golden Core stage, and his strength is quite impressive. So it shouldn't be hard to guess that he's extremely talented, young, and from the main building, right? He paused for a moment, then added, he also had a nascent soul stage protector with him. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, he looked into the darkness inside the shop and raised an eyebrow. A moment later, a fluctuation of energy rippled out, and a plump woman emerged from the shadows. The woman was tall and slender, wearing a purple dress, with her peach blossom eyes narrowed as she stared intently at Mu Yungui. After hearing Mu Yungui's words, the shopkeeper's daughter looked surprised. Then she put on a pitiful, tearful expression and tugged at the woman's sleeve, saying in a coquettish tone, Aunt Mo, he's using all my lines. Seeing this, Mu Yungui seized the opportunity to playfully add, hey. It seemed as if he was deliberately teasing the shopkeeper girl, but his tone remained indifferent. The woman took a few steps forward, her feet moving lightly like a butterfly in flight. She leaned slightly forward, her soft breasts drooping gently, trembling softly with her breath. A faint fragrance emanated from her, as fresh and pleasant as a morning breeze caressing flowers. The fragrance wafted gently, like a wisp of smoke drifting in the air. It wasn't strong, but it was enough to convey a sense of tenderness and subtlety. Mu Yungui couldn't help but frown slightly. Although he knew it was a seductive tactic, he still couldn't help but feel a little tempted. The woman stopped in front of Mu Yungui, a faint smile on her face, and spoke softly. Fellow Taoist has keen eyesight. To be able to discern so much information with just a few glances is truly rare for us at Kaianiu Tower. Her voice was clear and melodious, like heavenly music. The woman continued, if you join our Thousand Words Pavilion, we will certainly not treat you unfairly. I can assure you that as long as you cultivate diligently, you will definitely reach the nascent soul stage within 100 years, and may even break through to the deity transformation stage. What do you think? However, Mu Yungui was not moved by the woman's words. He stood silently, looking at the woman with an icy expression, and then coldly said, I'm here to buy a map. Does your Kaianiu Tower even still do business? Are you resorting to such low-class methods to recruit people now? He finished speaking with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Is this how you test cadres? Mu Yungui was speechless. Seeing that the atmosphere was a bit awkward, the shopkeeper girl hurriedly took out an exquisite scroll and handed it to Mu Yungui. This is absolutely the most detailed one, fellow Taoist. Please don't take it so seriously. The girl laughed, trying to smooth things over. Mu Yungui ignored it, and instead, with a thought, the scroll slowly unfurled, depicting the boundaries of the eastern continent in detail. With another thought, the map changed again, now showing the distribution of major sects and forces. Although many things are blurry, this is the best that even Kaianiu can do. In the previous life, Mu Yungui had not yet shown his talent at this time, so there might have been some changes. The map displayed 4 or 5 different contents. Mu Yungui glanced at them all and then handed the map to Jiang Ryuachin. Innate sword physique, photographic memory. After obtaining a brief list of the prodigies from various sects, Mu and his companion left. The two people in the shop watched the customer leave. After the customer's presence disappeared, the shopkeeper's face turned serious. Aunt Mo, which sect did those two belong to? Could he really be a rogue cultivator? The tall woman shook her head. I can't tell. The young shopkeeper returned to the counter, sat down with her chin resting on her hand, and muttered to herself. That's a bit troublesome. That boy didn't seem to have a good first impression of us. The other party is obviously not simple. If we offend them, we won't even know where to apologize. Upon seeing this, the woman whom the girl called Aunt Mo also sighed with self-reproach. I thought that the young man's cultivation level was not high, and that with a little trickery I might be able to extract some information. I didn't expect it to backfire. Please blame me, miss. The shopkeeper waved her hand. It's nothing, maybe the boy just doesn't like Aunt Mo's taste. If it had been me who took action just now, I might have given that boy a good beating. Aunt Mo, Chapter 3880,000. After a brief stop in Jiangyu City, where he bought some necessities, he boarded the passenger ship and set off again. Inside his room, Mu Yungui opened the window, and the scenery outside came into view. At this moment, Jiang Ryuachin was wearing a light blue dress, and her long black hair was tied up in a high ponytail, with a delicate silver hairpin as a perfect embellishment. Looking at her, Mu Yungui noticed that she already resembled the peerless and beautiful demon Empress from her previous life. Jiang Ryuachin was holding a pastry in her hands, as if she wanted to say something to Mu Yungui, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. After several attempts to speak, she looked at Mu Yungui timidly. Mu Yungui had noticed his hesitant little apprentice beside him long ago, but he didn't seem to know what to say. Unable to bear seeing the girl's appearance, Mu Yungui deliberately pretended to be clueless and asked, "Ryuachin, is there something you want to tell me?" Jiang Ryuachin lowered her head slightly, her voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz. I want Master to try this again." As she spoke with expectant eyes, she carefully handed the pastry in her hand to Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui sighed helplessly. "We've only been on the ship for half a day, and I've already eaten almost half a pound of osmanthus cake." His tone revealed a hint of complaint and helplessness. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin snapped back to reality, realizing that her behavior might have been inappropriate. Her face flushed red, and she felt embarrassed and ashamed. She quickly held the pastries in her hands in front of her, trying to hide her blushing cheeks. Seeing this, Mu Yungui shook his head helplessly, sighed, and thought to himself, "Sigh, it's happening again. They're so cute, I don't know how to refuse them." Then Mu Yungui said softly, "But Master can actually eat one more piece, but this really is the last one." Upon hearing this, the girl's face immediately lit up with a bright smile, her eyes crinkling into adorable crescent moons. She excitedly picked up a piece of pastry and offered it to Mu Yungui's lips again. Mu Yungui did not refuse Jiang Ryuachin's feeding. Rather, it could be said that this former demon Empress enjoyed feeding play when she was young, and such feeding has happened more than 10 times today. Outside the window, the passenger ship was slowly sailing down the river into a canyon, with towering, majestic mountains on both sides. These peaks were steep and precipitous, shrouded in mist. The map he bought from Kainiu Tower flashed through Mu Yungui's mind, and he thought to himself, although he really liked osmanthus cake the most, at least he didn't have to eat it today. Then Mu Yungui put on the cloud wood mask and made a spell in his hand. "Ryuachin, it's time to leave." "Hey, isn't this the middle of nowhere?" "Yes, this is the place." Jiang Ryuachin never questioned Mu Yungui's decision, and then 2 beams of light left the ship. After leaving the Meteor Dragon mountain range, Mu Yungui taught Jiang Ryuachin this technique. The girl was extremely talented and learned it in just a few days. Now she was using it with ease. Soon the two landed in a place overgrown with weeds, where only a stone slab under their feet stood out. "Take a look," Mu Yungui smiled slightly and reminded him. Jiang Ryuachin was initially clueless, but upon hearing Mu Yungui's words, she immediately understood. The power of light within her surged forth, and with a wave of her delicate arm, a completely different scene unfolded. The desolate land before us has been transformed into a small town by the river, with several large and magnificent ships moored in the river, giving it a solemn and mysterious feel. All around were various immortal shops, displaying a dazzling array of magical treasures, elixirs, and spiritual herbs. Seeing that more people had arrived, some cultivators also turned their gazes toward the two of them. Although her face was covered by a mask, Jiang Ryuachin was still uncomfortable with other people's gazes and seemed a little nervous. Mu Yungui gently patted Jiang Ryuachin's shoulder, comforting her. "Don't be nervous. Fighting is prohibited here, just be a little vigilant." His tone was calm and gentle, trying to ease Jiang Ryuachin's tension. After saying that, Mu Yungui led Jiang Ryuachin toward the giant ship. Besides the shopkeepers who rented the immortal shops here, there were also some cultivators who didn't have enough spirit stones to afford such expensive immortal shops, so they simply laid out their goods on a cloth and sat on the ground to hawk their wares. However, most of them are not valuable items, and you need a good eye to find good ones. The variety of spirit pets, spirit treasures, elixirs, and immortal herbs was overwhelming for Jiang Ryuachin. Seeing this, Mu Yungui simply slowed down. However, Mu Yungui soon stopped, and Jiang Ryuachin curiously peered forward from behind. At an inconspicuous stall, an old Taoist priest was selling talismans. "Old Taoist priest, how much are your talismans?" At the stall in front of me, an old man dressed in black and white Taoist robes was leaning lazily against the wall. On the tattered cloth where he sat, there were several stacks of talismans, mostly yellow and green. "Young man, take whichever one you fancy and come find me to settle the score." The Taoist waved his hand, indicating that Mu Yungui could do as he pleased. Mu Yungui didn't stand on ceremony, rummaging through the many talismans, searching for something. Finally, Mu Yungui selected 3 dark green talismans. The contents written on the 3 talismans were almost identical. Mysterious golden characters were densely written on the talisman paper of unknown grade. Holding the talismans in his hand, Mu Yungui could even feel the spiritual energy emanating from them. "I'll take these 3. Mu Yungui looked at the old Taoist priest. "How many spirit stones?" The old Taoist priest held out one hand. 500. "Okay, deal." Without hesitation, Mu Yungui agreed immediately. As he prepared to pay, he casually asked, "Why is this shadow scroll so cheap? How far can it be used to escape?" After hearing this, the old Taoist straightened up slightly and asked Mu Yungui with some curiosity, "Do you know that this talisman is called the Shadow Flash Talisman?" Mu Yungui said, somewhat speechless, "I don't know what I'm going to do with this." I originally thought you were just impressed by my superb talisman drawing skills, so you wanted to buy it to collect and admire. I didn't expect you to recognize this talisman and even know its specific usage." The old Taoist scratched his head and chuckled. "In that case, you can't buy it for 500 spirit stones. I won't sell it." After hearing this, Mu Yungui was even more speechless. He couldn't get the advantage, but he still wanted to get his hands on the Shadow Scroll. This Shadow Flash talisman allows one to escape over a greater distance than a regular shrinking earth talisman, and its aura dissipates extremely quickly. There are no realm restrictions on casting this talisman, making it very useful for Mu Yungui at this moment. However, drawing this flashing shadow talisman is too laborious and expensive. Not only are the materials expensive, but most importantly, very few people know how to draw it. But it is clear that this Taoist priest in front of us does. "Then how many spirit stones do you think it will sell for?" Mu Yungui squatted down in front of the stall and continued to ask. The Taoist priest rolled up his sleeves and gestured with his hand to indicate a number. 10,000. Chapter 39. Rounded down to half price, 400 per sheet. Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui was so angry at the price that he laughed and couldn't help but blurt out, "Damn it, Lao Deng, don't push your luck." He had previously thought that with his approximately 10,000 spirit stones, he could be confident and secure the 3 talismans for a maximum of 1,000 spirit stones. However, he did not expect that the other party was clearly looking for trouble. The Taoist priest wasn't angry, he just chuckled and said, "You can try to bargain." Mu Yungui was straightforward. "Round it down to half, 400 spirit stones per sheet." The old Taoist priest wasn't annoyed. Instead, he said, "Just add 100. Do you think my talismans are all cheap stuff?" Seeing this, Mu Yungui retorted, "Why do you say spirit stones are so worthless? Do I look like a wealthy person? How many spirit stones can you offer?" "My brother and I are dirt poor. Name your price or we won't bother you anymore." While Mu Yungui and the old Taoist priest were chatting away, Jiang Ryuachin, wearing a fox mask, obediently squatted in front of the stall, showing great interest in the talismans. After asking for permission, she carefully helped the old Taoist priest fold up the talismans that Mu Yungui had messed up, one by one, without disturbing her master's bargaining. "How about 3,000? One flash talisman costs 1,000 spirit stones." The old Taoist priest gave his final price. 3,000 spirit stones are enough to buy a top-quality yellow-grade spirit treasure. The talisman you used with a wave of your hand is worth at most that price. The old Taoist priest retorted, "But this talisman of mine can save lives in a critical moment, and life is very valuable." Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui turned around and grabbed Jiang Ryuachin, intending to leave. The old Taoist priest hurriedly called out, wait a minute, young man." Mu Yungui stopped, a smile playing on his lips, and then deliberately asked, "What? Is there something else?" The old Taoist priest asked cautiously, 2,000 spirit stones and I'll take this shadow scroll. How about it? Deal, don't back out this time." With that, Mu Yungui swiftly took out a bag of spirit stones, grabbed the talisman in one hand and put it into his ring, all in one smooth motion. After the transaction was completed, Mu Yungui didn't linger and wanted to leave with Jiang Ryuachin. The old Taoist priest felt a pang of regret, realizing he hadn't called out enough. "By the way, I've sold the talismans too. Young man, could you tell me the name of the sword in the sword box behind you?" After hearing this, Mu Yungui hesitated for a moment before saying, "The sword is named Obsession." The Taoist priest got the answer and didn't feel too bad. He considered it as buying a sword name with a talisman. The old Taoist priest then asked, "Could you draw your sword and show its edge?" Mu Yungui rolled her eyes. "What do you think?" Indeed, this was somewhat presumptuous. The old Taoist priest didn't press the matter further. Instead, he called out to Jiang Ryuachin with a smile and said, "Hey, young lady, thank you for helping me organize the talismans. Would you like another one? Please choose whichever you like." Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin immediately spoke to Mu Yungui telepathically. "Master this old man." Mu Yungui thought to himself, "He's not a bad person." I was talking to him just now, and he just wanted to talk to me more. But we were on the same page, and we were able to figure out each other's identities to some extent. We'll talk about the specifics after we've settled in. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin was filled with horror. So much sparring happened in just a few minutes of ordinary conversation. I really do have a lot to learn. What about Master? What should I do? The girl couldn't understand any of this, so she had to ask Mu Yungui for help. But since that's the case, Ryuachin can just choose the one she thinks looks good and keep it. Mu Yungui didn't care and patted the girl's head, speaking in his heart. Hey. After agreeing, the girl squatted down again and began selecting from the talismans. After a moment, she took out a talisman that was the color of a peach blossom. Jiang Ryuachin thought the talisman was drawn extremely beautifully. This color is quite unusual. Wait, I don't think I've seen this one before. Mu Yungui pondered for a moment, then said, Hey, old Deng, you don't mean you're after my sister's talent, do you? We already have a master. If you're trying to win people over with these cheap talismans, then forget it. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin quickly grabbed Mu Yungui's arm and mustered her courage to say to the old Taoist priest, I will not leave my brother, and I only have one master. My master is the best, please don't overthink it. Seeing this, the old Taoist smiled and quickly waved his hand, looking at Mu Yungui. No, consider it a bonus with the 3 talismans. Besides, the young lady helped me organize the talismans, which saved me the trouble. But based on what you said, I'm more interested in your master. Then go ahead if you're interested. Mu Yungui left with those words, then led Jiang Ryuachin away from the stall and continued walking towards the giant passenger ship. The two walked only a few steps before stopping in front of a shop. Mu Yungui stepped inside and selected a string of desserts made from celestial fruits. Jiang Ryuachin gently removed half of her mask, revealing her cherry-like lips, and took a small bite of the fruit. Her eyes were full of tenderness and expectation. After taking a bite of the sweet fruit, the girl handed the remaining spiritual fruit to Mu Yungui, hoping he would try it. Master, this is delicious. I'll have some. Mu Yungui looked at Jiang Ryuachin in front of him, pondered for a moment, then bent down slightly and gently took a bite of the spiritual fruit in Jiang Ryuachin's hand. Delicious. Damn it, Jir, there are people being lovey-dovey in public. I feel like a dog that just happened to be passing by and got kicked. A boy in blue and a girl in black arrived at the ferry crossing. They were just observing casually when they caught sight of 2 masked people whispering sweet nothings to each other in the distance. The boy in blue had an extremely handsome face, as if it had been sculpted with exquisite skill. A black headband tied his long hair, which flowed in the wind, and a white jade pendant hung at his waist. I just arrived at this ferry, and this is the scene I saw. The boy in blue pounded his chest and stamped his feet in frustration. Behind the boy in blue stood a girl in a black dress. She carried an exquisite gyukin on her back. The girl's face was stunningly beautiful, and her short, neat hair was combed neatly around her ears, adding a unique touch of heroic spirit. The girl carrying the zither, called Jir, spoke coldly. Young master, stop acting crazy here. The boy in blue seemed unfazed by Jir's complaints and said to himself, It's a pity that the 2 of them were wearing masks, so we couldn't see them very clearly. We only know that the girl fed the boy a bite of spiritual fruit. Sigh, I'm so envious. Why don't I buy a bunch of those spirit fruits too, and Jir can feed me some? A ripple flashed across Jir's calm eyes, but she quickly returned to her usual demeanor. Young master, please have some self-respect. The boy in blue chuckled and smiled, but there was a hint of melancholy in his eyes. The atmosphere was a little awkward. The boy in blue thought for a moment, then looked at the stall next to him and quickly changed the subject, asking the shopkeeper, Senior, this talisman is drawn really well. Look at the characters, they look just like characters, haha. The old Taoist priest glanced at it and repeated what he had said to Mu Yungui and the other man earlier. Young brother, whichever one you like, just take it and I'll settle the bill. The old Taoist priest smiled slightly. Originally, the Taoist had already prepared to close up shop after earning enough for the boat fare. But now, he decided to stay a little longer. 2 more interesting young people arrived. Chapter 40, The Butcher Hangs Ahead. Seeing that neither of the 2 celestial ferry boats moored at the ferry crossing showed any sign of starting, Mu Yungui breathed a sigh of relief. At least he had made it in time. Since starting the immortal ferry requires a massive amount of spirit stones, it usually stops at a ferry crossing for a few days until the spirit stones paid by the cultivators who board the ship are at least enough to cover the cost of one trip, and then it will depart. Like fishermen who go out to sea to fish in the far east of Pinglai, profits and losses are a common occurrence. However, With the addition of services such as treasure shops on the ferry, cultivators engaged in this trade will not necessarily go bankrupt if they suffer losses. Below the bow of the ship stood two cultivators dressed in fine clothes, one tall and one short. The shorter cultivator had a fat head and big ears, and a red rope tied around his waist with a copper coin from an ordinary dynasty, but the coin was as big as a teacup, which was a bit exaggerated. The taller cultivator, standing next to the fat cultivator, appeared much more normal, his gaze sweeping over the other cultivators around him. He frowned as he looked at the two approaching figures wearing masks. As Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin were about to reach the ferry, they quietly removed their masks and hung them on their waists. They had entered earlier to conceal their identities, but now they had to remove them. However, the girl still covered her face with a black veil. Mu Yungui clasped his hands in a fist salute to the two of them. The tall, imposing cultivator nodded in response to the two men's politeness. Seeing Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin approaching, the shorter cultivator smiled and took a few steps forward to greet them. "Young fellow Taoists, what are your names, lineages, and purposes?" "Two rogue cultivators. I am Mu Yungui, and I am going with my sister to Kiyuming sect to see if they are still recruiting disciples. Although these ferries do check identities, everyone knows that as long as you don't give outlandish reasons that would lead you to be considered a heretic or demonic practitioner, there shouldn't be any major problems." Mu Yungui simply made up some reasons. The short, stout monk chuckled and nodded, slowly explaining. "The journey from here to the ferry near Kiyuming sect takes about 3 days, but we'll have to wait another 3 days for the ferry to depart. If you two aren't in a hurry, you can spend a few days exploring this ferry crossing. Although it's a bit shabby compared to other ferry crossings, it has everything you need." Mu Yungui secretly calculated the time in his heart. If he judged according to the development trajectory of his previous life, it should still be in time. He still had a considerable amount of spirit stones left in his spatial ring. So, he decided to spend them all to buy some necessary resources for Jiang Ryuachin and himself right there. Mu Yungui replied, "Yes, we'll wait. We'll reserve a superior room." 300 spirit stones? Upon hearing about the superior room, the short, stout cultivator's eyes narrowed into slits with laughter, and he hurriedly agreed. "Superior rooms? Many cultivators have booked them these past few days. I wonder if there are any left." The short, stout cultivator pondered, then looked at the tall cultivator beside him. "There's one room left." The tall, silent cultivator beside him spoke up to confirm. He then rummaged through his clothes and pulled out a jade pendant with special symbols on it, handing it to Mu Yungui. After accepting the jade pendant, Mu Yungui planned to take Jiang Ryuachin to find an inn to stay in first. Before they had gone far, 2 more cultivators arrived at the spot, brushing past Mu Yungui, carrying with them a bloody smell. Then a shout came from behind. "Fat Hai, get your grandpa a top-class ferry cabin." Earlier, Mu Yungui had glanced at the other party out of the corner of his eye. They were a man and a woman, both around 30 years old. The man's body was like a small mountain of flesh. His upper body was naked, and he held a wood-chopping knife that smelled of fish, like a butcher. The man had 2 bloodied heads hanging from his waist. One head had a strange horn and was obviously not human. It was at least a transformed demon at the golden core stage. The other head was that of a male cultivator with a clean cut, clearly severed with a single stroke. Its eyes were wide open, not yet closed in retribution. The man with the knife walked by, leaving a trail of scattered blood. Behind the man was a woman with slender branches bearing abundant fruit, dressed in a red dress that covered her body, holding a palm leaf fan and following behind the man at a leisurely pace. The short, stout man known as Fatty Hai was somewhat surprised to see the couple and spoke telepathically to the tall cultivator beside him. 2 plagues have arrived." Despite his thoughts, Fatty Hai still greeted them with a somewhat awkward smile. The tall man next to Fatty Hai also frowned and walked over together. Mu Yungui was somewhat speechless and muttered to himself, "Good grief, I seem to run into all sorts of trouble. Is the next thing they're going to do is deliberately make things difficult for me just to get the last superior room? Are they about to reveal their true strength?" Although Mu Yungui thought this way, he quietly put the jade pendant into his pocket and quickly pulled Jiang Ryuachin away. The opponent made no attempt to conceal their aura. 2 golden core cultivators, surely they wouldn't risk their lives just to show off, would they? The 4 people behind him began to talk, while Mu Yungui gradually lowered his aura and quickly left with the girl. "Kid, you're in your place, right?" A rough voice rang out, stopping Mu Yungui while 2 auras locked onto the 2 of them. Mu Yungui did not turn around, as if he had not heard. Seeing that Mu Yungui and the other woman seemed not to have heard, the woman holding the palm leaf fan waved her hand lightly, and a gust of wind blades blew towards Jiang Ryuachin. Mu Yungui noticed that the smile had disappeared from his face. When the wind blew, Mu Yungui had no choice but to turn around and raise his sword box to defend himself. However, before the wind blade could touch the cloudwood sword box, it turned into a gentle breeze with a strong scent of rouge, which gently caressed Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin. The woman smiled when she saw Mu Yungui stop attacking. "How dare you injure someone at the ferry crossing?" The tall man next to Fatty Hai roared angrily, and with a flick of his sleeve, a large hand covered in golden runes grabbed directly at the woman. The woman was instantly pinned down and unable to move, but as if on purpose, she not only did not beg for mercy, but also forcibly endured the pain and let out an alluring moan. Then she said quietly, "We just wanted to ask that young master if he would be willing to sell us a superior room, so why are we treated like this by Liu Gongfeng?" Upon hearing this, Liu Gongfeng's face turned extremely ugly. He then snorted coldly, and the golden hand dissipated, releasing the woman. He knew that this woman had already figured out the proper boundaries, and was going to attack them without breaking the rules. If handled improperly, it could easily provoke public outrage. After all, this ferry crossing is a public place, and no one can arbitrarily oppress others here. The butcher-like man's face also turned ugly. "Master Liu, my wife only used a gentle breeze to call out to that young man, and you want to kill us for that. Although Elder Liu is a nascent soul cultivator, isn't this behavior a bit too domineering?" Seeing the awkward atmosphere, Fatty Hai spoke telepathically to Liu, the temple's elder. "Old Liu, it's not a good time to confront these two. Getting entangled with them will only cause trouble. Think about it. The couple's acts of murder and robbery on the mountain seem heinous and demonic. Yet they haven't been condemned by the major sects of the Eastern continent. They've already figured out the rules and boundaries. Don't play right into their hands." Liu Gongfeng thought to himself, "But we just sold the last ticket to that boy, and they stopped him and threatened him. How can we save face? If we allow them to act like this in front of us, it's a slap in the face." Fat Hai smiled wryly and said, "There's nothing we can do about it. That's just how it is in this line of work at the ferry crossing. In this situation, the rules actually restrict us." Fat Hai comforted himself, "But it's not certain that a conflict will occur. I just hope that the young man won't act rashly. However, if they do anything outrageous, if you, Lao Liu, are confident you can quickly kill them, you don't need to report to me. If you can only kill one, please do not do so, as making an enemy of them will bring endless trouble." However, after saying that, Fatty Hai felt that his idea was somewhat absurd. However, the other party shouldn't be that reckless. Chapter 41, taking an inch and pushing it further. The woman dusted off her clothes and approached Mu Yungui with the butcher, saying, "Young master, so you bought the last superior room, right? I was in a hurry earlier and wanted to call you two back, so I only fanned a gust of wind. Please don't take it to heart." After saying that, the woman gave Mu Yungui and the other woman a deep bow. "Well, my husband and I were injured a while ago, and we were thinking of buying a superior room on the ferry so we could rest and recuperate in peace. Sigh tilde, I wonder if you could sell us the last superior room." After the woman finished speaking, her foxy eyes looked directly at the two of them with an apologetic expression. Seeing those eyes, Jiang Ryuachin felt a surge of pity and murmured to Mu Yungui, "Master, why don't we give this room to this lady?" Before she could finish speaking, the white bead on the girl's chest emitted a faint light, and a cool sensation surged into her brain, bringing her back to her senses. Her eyes were now filled with vigilance. Seeing that the other woman had regained consciousness, the woman showed neither anger nor shame at having her magic exposed. Instead, she covered her mouth and smiled, taking a step forward and reaching out to examine Jiang Ryuachin's necklace. "Sweetie, the beads on this necklace are really special. Can I take a look?" Jiang Ryuachin took a few steps back to avoid the woman. Jiang Ryuachin had never seen anyone act like this before, even after being discovered for her underhanded tactics, and she was somewhat at a loss for words. Although Jiang Ryuachin was very angry, she remained rational and said softly, "I'm sorry, I don't really want to show it to you. Please have some self-respect." Seeing Jiang Ryuachin's reaction, Mu Yungui nodded in satisfaction. The disciple I taught was indeed obedient, sensible, and calm. If the woman beside me now were that female demon from my past life, I might have already stabbed her with my sword, no matter where I was. Achoo! Jiang Ryuachin sneezed, somewhat puzzled, and became even more wary of the woman in front of her. Mu Yungui quickly patted the girl's head. Someone felt a little guilty. Mu Yungui looked at the woman in front of him and realized that she had already noticed the other party's spell before it was even turned on. He was not charmed by her and instead secretly complained. Why are the methods of these cultivators lately all about the soul? Seeing that the other party's attitude had changed drastically, the woman could only apologize and say, "I'm sorry, I just couldn't help but want to take a look. I apologize for being so presumptuous." The woman smoothed things over and then steered the conversation back to the main point. "So, sir, would you be willing to part with that room?" Mu Yungui said directly, "Okay." He then immediately took out the jade pendant from his pocket, which he hadn't even warmed up yet. Oh. The woman had expected to be threatened or bribed, but Mu Yungui's decisive answer caught her off guard. Looking at the other person's eyes, Mu Yungui couldn't help but think to himself, "Two golden core cultivators, do you want to die?" Then the woman beamed and said politely, "Young master is so generous, willing to part with what you love. It seems I should give you double the spirit stones to be worthy of your generosity." Well, Mu Yungui immediately reached out his hand. The woman's eyes twitched, and her smile became somewhat stiff. "No, you actually dare to take it." Fatty Hai and Liu Gongfeng did not leave. They were heading in this direction. They originally thought the young man was a man who could judge the situation, but they did not expect him to do this in the end. At this moment, the man who had remained silent behind the woman spoke up. "A mere few spirit stones? I can afford that, haha." The butcher-like man pulled out a spirit stone from his waist, but the stone was stained with blood from his hand. After taking the spirit stone, the butcher did not hand it to Mu Yungui. Instead, he casually threw it on the ground in front of Mu Yungui and laughed. "I was afraid of getting my hands dirty, so I might as well throw it on the ground. I hope you don't mind, brother." After saying that, he wiped his hands with the head on his waist and shook them, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Mu Yungui's sword energy surged forth, deflecting the gushing blood. Seeing the other person's perverse sense of humor, Mu Yungui frowned. He simply handed over the jade pendant. The butcher seemed not to see her, and left Mu Yungui standing there. Mu Yungui smiled with relief. Since the other party was unmoved, Mu Yungui also threw the jade pendant on the ground and deliberately said, "Me too. I was afraid of dirtying your hands, brother. I'm so afraid. Let's see who can hold their temper. Pick it up or not, I'll admit defeat if I even lower my head." Fatty Hai, the ferry manager, looked displeased. The couple was clearly humiliating Mu Yungui, but Mu Yungui was acting impulsively, which wasn't a good sign. So Fatty Hai simply came over, lifted his robe, squatted down, and helped Mu Yungui pick up the 6 gleaming, top-grade spirit stones, grinning sheepishly. "Here, fellow Taoist, keep them safe." Then Liu Gongfeng spoke up in a deep voice. "Zhang Tu, they are willing to give you a superior room, yet you still make things difficult for 2 juniors." Upon hearing this, Zhang Tu immediately changed his expression, grinning sheepishly. "How could that be? Liu Gongfeng's words are biased." With the help of Fatty Hai and that Liu Gongfeng, Zhang Tu's attempts to humiliate Mu Yungui were largely ineffective. However, Zhang Tu was curious about Mu Yungui's identity and didn't understand why this person dared to act this way. Could he be a prodigy from a major sect? But these young man and woman were definitely unfamiliar faces and didn't match the prodigies of those major sects. The atmosphere was a little awkward. A note from a zither began to play. The crowd looked in the direction of the sound, and the music materialized into a pale blue phantom of a goddess. She appeared in mid-air, swept by a gust of wind, and rose up with the jade pendant on the ground. She landed in the butcher's hand, and the music ended with the phantom disappearing as well. "Peace is precious, peace is precious." A clear male voice rang out from afar. "There are more experts," Mu Yungui thought to himself. Chapter 42, A Piece of Cake. Mu Yungui originally intended to turn around and leave, but now there were more and more people. In the distance, the blue-clad youth smoothed the strings of his zither. Then with a flick of his sleeve, the ethereal, glass-like zither floated before him. He was then embraced by the girl in the black dress behind him. The young man walked towards them, clasped his hands in a fist salute, and said, "My name is Ning Xianqi." The short-haired girl introduced herself as Gjai. Mu Yungui was taken aback when he heard Ning Xianqi's name. As Jiang Ruochen saw the crowd increase, she became more vigilant. Gjai noticed this and gave Jiang Ruochen a smile. Ning Xianqi said, "Meeting is fate. Everyone please calm down Tilda." After receiving the jade pendant, the woman looked at the newcomer and saw that he was the kind of person who was not interesting. Her interest in making things difficult for Mu Yungui diminished somewhat, so she said to Zhang Tu beside her, "Husband Tilda, this is no fun. We have the jade pendant. Shall we go and look around somewhere else?" Zhang Tu nodded, and then the two turned and left. Pang Hai breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the matter was resolved. But then the woman seemed to remember something and turned to Mu Yungui, saying, "Finally, thank you, young master. Hope to see you again next time, Tilda." Mu Yungui responded with a smile. Then the two of them actually left. Fatty Hai clasped his hands in apology to Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen, saying, "Young brothers, I must apologize. I didn't expect those two to appear here." Mu Yungui shook his head. "Actually, I was just thinking that it's better to avoid trouble and was ready to hand over the jade pendant, but those two were too unreasonable." At this moment, Ning Xianqi asked, "But what about those two?" Fatty Hai sighed and explained, "Those two are relatively well-known rogue cultivators in this area. The man is called Zhang Tu, and the woman is called Su Feng. As you have seen, they kill and rob without any restraint, doing whatever they please. It's best not to make enemies with them." Ning Xianqi asked doubtfully, "Doesn't the Eastern continent have the Academy overseeing things? If they act so blatantly, do they think the Academy and other righteous sects will just let them run rampant like this?" Fat Hai said, "Then we have to talk about the two heads hanging on the butcher's waist. That demon was a golden core stage bat demon within the territory of the Yundong Mountain sect. However, since gaining intelligence, this bat demon had been diligently cultivating. Perhaps because it was near the Yundong Mountain sect, it had never harmed anyone. It would even use illusions to guide lost mortals down the mountain. Doing these things revealed its identity. It only wanted to cultivate diligently in the mountains and pursue the great Tao. The Yundong Mountain sect turned a blind eye to this neighbor. However, it is unknown how these two learned of the demon's whereabouts. They coveted the bat demon's demon core and found it, killing it. However, the Academy and sect could not easily retaliate. After all, it was just a demon, and even if it didn't harm people, it was still a demon. And that head belonged to an old golden core cultivator who had a grudge against these two. As for the grudge, there are many different opinions. At that time, the woman had not yet advanced to the golden core stage and almost died. More than 20 years later, even the old golden core cultivator had almost forgotten about the incident. The old golden core cultivator, who had already established his own sect, was ambushed by the two. After a fierce battle, Zhang Tu used the cleaver in his hand to cut off the old golden core cultivator's head. The headless corpse was even nailed in front of the sect's ancestral hall. It was horrifying. As for the grudges between cultivators, it is even more inappropriate for the Academy to interfere. So those two are lunatics who walk the line of the rules, and they only provoke those they can afford to provoke. If their target has a powerful background, they will never make a move, and they will never leave any evidence in their tracks. Mu Yungui gave a faint "oh" after hearing this. These two are indeed much more difficult to deal with than the others. However, Mu Yungui, who had initially found the situation somewhat troublesome, suddenly had a plan when he looked at the young man named Ning Xianqi. After chatting for a while, Fatty Hai brought up what had just happened, and Mu Yungui indicated that there was no need to worry. Afterwards, Pang Hai handed 2 jade pendants for ordinary guest rooms to Mu Yungui and Ning Xianqi, and then took his leave. Ning Xianqi found Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen interesting, so he invited them to wander around the area. He was partly curious, and partly because Xai's cultivation level had actually reached the golden core stage. If the two of them had had any murderous intent earlier, he would have to tell them to think twice. However, Mu Yungui politely declined Ning Xianqi's offer, leaving behind the following words. "Ning Xianqi, the young master of Zhangzhuqin Valley, I know you. My name is Mu Yungui. I am very skilled in forming, dissolving, and modifying contracts. Mu Yungui said that if the other party needed anything, they could meet again on the ferry in 3 days, and then he took his leave with Jiang Ruochen. Perhaps due to potential danger, Mu Yungui did not keep the remaining spirit stones. He and Jiang Ruochen did not deliberately conceal their whereabouts, and spent all the remaining spirit stones at this ferry to buy pills, immortal materials, and spiritual treasures. Mu Yungui specially selected a defensive magical artifact for Jiang Ruochen to use. Obsession is used by Mu Yungui as a finishing move and is not easily shown to others. For this reason, Mu Yungui even bought 2 spirit swords to use in ordinary battles. They should be made by the same person, and their names are quite interesting, namely, Half a Jin and 8 Liang. Both spirit swords were forged by Shen Yuan Leng Yun and were extremely sharp. One sword had a light pink scabbard with a peach blossom carved on it, which was very lifelike. The other sword had a dark green scabbard with several bamboo leaves carved on it, which was also very exquisite. Perhaps because the names were not very appealing, the 2 spirit swords remained unsold. When Mu Yungui inquired with the shopkeeper, The shopkeeper could only smile wryly and say that the immortal master who forged these two swords was a stubborn man who refused to let him change the names. In addition, the immortal master's craftsmanship was extremely good, and he also supplied other spirit treasures, all of which were of the highest quality. So the shopkeeper simply let these two spirit swords serve as shop assistants. Mu Yungui didn't hold back and simply bought two spirit swords. However, he renamed them. Jiang Ryuachen's sword, Half a Jin, which was engraved with peach blossoms, was named Sorrow Relief, and his own sword, 8 Liang, was named Broken Force. Jiang Ryuachen, on the other hand, was very fond of the Sorrowful Handbook. With 3 days remaining, which was suitable for cultivation, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachen checked into an inn. Unlike the ferry, the inn didn't have a shortage of rooms, so Mu Yungui still chose the best one, and his spirit stones were all gone. Mu Yungui planned to go into seclusion for 3 days. Inside the house, the cloud-concealing flag was summoned, concealing the aura within. The purchased talismans were hidden in various places. Mu Yungui spent most of the day constructing a powerful sword formation and a spirit-gathering formation. If an intruder were to step inside, they would be severely damaged in an instant. This was the first time Jiang Ryuachen had ever seen her master so serious. After finishing his work, Mu Yungui clapped his hands and instructed Jiang Ryuachen, "Ryuachen, I will be going into seclusion for a short period of time. Please do not leave your room for the next 2 days." Jiang Ryuachen nodded. Is it the pressure from those 2 rogue cultivators at the Golden Core stage? Jiang Ryuachen bit her lip. It seemed she also needed to work harder on her cultivation. Chapter 43, The Same Moonlight. Sword Sect Dark Chamber. The wall is made of blue bricks with a few candles stuck in it. The candle flames flicker and don't illuminate very far. On the cold, damp floor tiles, some blood was flowing. The young girl, Jian Shear, with her eyes covered by a black veil, lay paralyzed on the ground, her delicate body covered in blood, looking extremely terrifying. Her body trembled slightly, as if she might collapse at any moment. Her black face mask, which she had never removed, lay scattered on the ground, revealing her pale skin and disheveled hair. However, the dim light made it impossible to see her face clearly. 12, are you all right? Beside the girl, Jian Jiu was also in a sorry state, with several sword wounds on his body, his white clothes tattered and stained with blood. However, Jian Jiu was not very concerned about his own injuries, and his eyes were full of worry for Jian Shear. Jian 12 was panting heavily, somewhat flustered, her hands groping haphazardly on the ground, seemingly searching for something. After several struggles, she finally found the face mask and shakily tied it back around her face. The girl finally breathed a long sigh of relief when the face mask covered her face, returning to her usual calm expression. "I'm fine," Jian 12's weak voice rang out. At this moment, a calm and gentle female voice rang out. "Sword 12, if you're not crippled, restore it to its original state before entering the Immortal Ascension secret realm. You know, Dark Sword doesn't need waste." Sword 12 spoke. 12 knows. "Thank you, Holy Maiden." After saying that, the door in the distance was opened. A few days ago, the 2 people came in and sometimes fainted from the pain and had long lost track of day and night. At this moment, after Shen Qinghen opened the door, moonlight shone down, illuminating the blue bricks on the ground, indicating that it was already late at night. The footsteps faded into the distance until they could no longer be heard, at which point the 2 breathed a sigh of relief. After a long while, Jian Jiu struggled to his feet and helped the girl from the pool of blood to her feet. Jian Jiu asked with concern, "How's your cultivation level?" "Thanks to the Holy Maiden, my cultivation level has been raised to the peak of the Foundation establishment stage," Jian 12 said. "You know, this isn't actually a good thing. The Holy Maiden can actually mobilize Little 10 and Little 11. Jian 12 shook his head and replied, "They have their own missions, don't they? We failed to protect the Holy Maiden last time, and it's still us this time, which means the Holy Maiden needs us. For the sake of the Holy Maiden and the Sect Master, it's all worth it." A faint golden light shone around Jian Shear as he circulated his internal energy to heal his injuries, but he also coughed up a mouthful of blood. The golden light was mixed with other auras. When the girl circulated her cultivation technique, another aura went out of control, causing Jian 12 to be injured again. After using that secret technique that elevates your cultivation level, you can't circulate your cultivation for a short period of time, Jian Jiu hurriedly reminded him. Jian Jiu sighed again. "The Holy Maiden directly and brutally transferred her cultivation into your body, 12th sister. Your future cultivation path will be affected to some extent." Upon hearing what Jian Jiu said, Giant 12 frowned and said, "Why think so far ahead? Giant Jew, have you forgotten? We are all suicide soldiers. As long as we can be of use, that's all that matters." Giant Jew shook his head and slowly said, 12. Actually, you're different from us, and we've long considered you our youngest sister. So if there's any danger in the immortal ascension secret realm, let me go first, okay? Giant 12 frowned, feeling somewhat uncomfortable with what Giant Jew had said, though he didn't know why. "I feel a little down." Sword 12 looked at Sword 9 and asked, "And what about you?" Actually, Giant Jew's injuries were also very serious, but they weren't as severe as Giant Shear's. Several energy points were destroyed by the Holy Maiden, but it doesn't affect me too much. They might recover in the future. Giant Jew smiled, scratched his head, and said, "It just so happens that I can keep my cultivation level at the peak of the Foundation establishment stage." So, inside a bustling building, music and song filled the air as dozens of dancers in revealing gowns performed a captivating dance. Their graceful figures and light steps made them appear like fairies descended to earth. Inside the building, the girl's natural fragrance mingled with the scent of rouge and face powder. Before the palace stood a magnificent throne, upon which a short-haired youth leaned languidly. His gaze wandered among the dancers, but he seemed somewhat distracted. The young man had his arms around two stunningly beautiful young women, who sat gracefully beside him and were feeding him delicate pastries. The boy opened his mouth slightly, chewed gently, and enjoyed the wonderful taste. However, the young man seemed unsatisfied with the beautiful scenery before him. He suddenly pulled the beautiful woman beside him into his arms and grabbed her voluptuous waist with his other hand, causing the woman to let out a seductive moan. The woman's eyes became unfocused, and her body trembled slightly, as if yearning for more intimacy and caresses. Just as she was about to take it a step further, suddenly, a crow cawed outside the window. Upon hearing the sound, the boy frowned slightly, lost all interest, and a hint of dissatisfaction appeared on his face. After the crow entered and landed in front of the hall, it actually spoke in human language. Young Sect Master, the Sect Master of the Immortal Ascension Secret Realm, said that it is expected to be broken in about 10 days, at which time it will be the young Sect Master's turn to take action. The sect leader said that the small world has already nurtured a complete Great Tao cycle, and it may give birth to world origin glazed glass and heavenly essence spirit liquid. For low-level cultivators, it is a priceless treasure that is hard to come by. However, since that small world is still relatively young, entry is restricted to those within the Foundation establishment stage. Once young Master enters, he will be virtually invincible. The crow then changed the subject. However, Shen Qinghan, the holy maiden of the Tai Chuan sword sect, will also be going. This woman was born with holy eyes and a divine heart. The information sent back by the messenger said that Shen Qinghan has never lost in the sword sect. She can fight against golden core cultivators. She is the biggest obstacle for the young master this time. Upon hearing the name, the boy raised an eyebrow. The crow continued. The sect leader instructed that life and death are irrelevant in this secret realm. If you are no match for Shen Qinghan, please take good care of your life, young master, and consider it as an opportunity to broaden your horizons. That old man actually thinks I'll lose? I don't really like hearing that. The short-haired boy snorted coldly, raised his right hand and made a fist, and the crow burst open in the hall. The foul-smelling blood splattered on the dancers, but no one dared to move. Everyone lowered their heads and dared not utter a word. The young man stood up, stretched, and muttered to himself, "Interesting. Perfect timing, let's go see that so-called sword sect saintess. I heard she's an absolute beauty. I wonder what it's like to play with her." The young man stepped outside the building, the moonlight shining on his high-quality, expensive robe, making it sparkle like starlight. "This time, I'll kill more trash and make my name known." So, under the same moonlight, a young man dressed in the robes of the Tai Chuan sword sect rode his sword. Seemingly exhausted, he stopped and slowed down to walk across the wilderness, gazing at the moonlight, lost in thought. Chapter 44, Spirit Mine. A spirit mine of the Tai Chuan sword sect. A sword light streaked across the sky, and a short-haired youth dressed in a white robe from the sword sect arrived. The short-haired boy had a tall and straight posture, and his brows revealed a lively spirit. Upon noticing something amiss, the protective array at the entrance of the spirit mine appeared, and the swords of the two cultivators at the gate hummed as they stared intently at the young man before them, ready to strike and kill him at the slightest sign of trouble. The Holy Maiden's special envoy has come to collect spirit stones. The young man concealed his sword intent, his aura becoming that of an ordinary person. He took out a token from his robes and showed it to the crowd, saying, "Emergency situation." Within the mine, several powerful auras suddenly locked onto the young man, all of them around the golden core stage. A moment later, a white-haired man wearing a hairpin and cloth clothes appeared. He looked to be an elderly man in his 70s. The old man waved to the guards, signaling them to relax their vigilance, and strolled over leisurely. In the past, Ling Xiao always came in person, and even if he was busy, he would have someone bring the sect leader's token. What do you mean by this? Although the old man in plain clothes did not release a probing aura like the cultivators who had not yet appeared in the cave, the boy felt an even more suffocating pressure. The person in front of me is stronger than the people inside. A bead of cold sweat appeared on the boy's forehead. He bowed deeply and hurriedly explained, "It's an emergency. The sect leader is still at the Immortal Ascension secret realm, working with other powerful figures from other sects to try and break the restrictions. Although my uncle hasn't left this private mine for a long time, he must know something about it, right? The sect leader simply doesn't have time to return to the sect right now. The Holy Maiden is confident about the upcoming secret realm treasures. After breaking through the Immortal Ascension secret realm and obtaining the Heavenly Spirit Elixir, she will attempt to break through to the 9th rank. So, they need some spirit stones and asked me to come and get them. We came on the Holy Maiden's orders." After listening, the old man retorted, "You think you can take away hundreds of thousands of spirit stones here with just a disciple's token?" The boy stood still, his body tense, beads of sweat beading on his forehead. He gripped the token tightly in his hand and stared nervously at the old man before him. Before the boy could speak, the old man sneered, a hint of disdain and contempt flashing in his eyes. With a gentle wave of his hand, a powerful spiritual pressure swept towards the boy. The boy felt as if he were standing beneath a massive mountain, the immense pressure almost suffocating him. But he gritted his teeth, straightened his body, and struggled against the force. The old man's sparse eyebrows twitched slightly. He hadn't expected the boy to be able to withstand his spiritual pressure. He decided to increase his strength, swinging his arm again, and the spiritual pressure surged towards the boy even more intensely. The boy felt unprecedented pressure. His knees began to bend, and a trickle of blood escaped from the corner of his mouth, but he still persevered. The boy made a sword gesture in his hand, and the flying sword at his waist was drawn. A thin white line surrounded him, cutting through the invisible pressure and giving him a slight chance to catch his breath. The old man hadn't expected the boy to have such skill, or rather, the courage to draw his sword. Although their cultivation level and age were not high, their swordsmanship was outstanding, making them a genius within the sect. At this moment, the old man felt that it was a waste to use the young man as a hidden sword, something that could be discarded at any time. Wait a minute. Uncle Master, please take another look at my token," the young man said through gritted teeth. His voice was a little hoarse, but full of indomitable determination. The old man frowned, somewhat displeased. He hesitated for a moment, but finally reached out and took the token from the boy. The middle-aged man carefully examined the token, and after a moment he dispersed the oppressive aura. The boy's voice trembled slightly as it echoed in the old man's mind. "Uncle Master, I am the sect master's dark sword. This sword intent is genuine. It's a cultivation technique that only inner disciples can practice. Moreover, Uncle Shen, the Holy Maiden specifically instructed that I'll add 5 points to your share of the mineral vein this time I'm here. After all, you've been guarding this place for many years." After saying this, a ripple flashed in the old man's cloudy eyes. Is this spiritual vein almost fully mined out? After all, it's the sect leader's private mine, so the Holy Maiden has the authority to make decisions on this matter. After saying that, the boy sighed, took out a pill from his pocket, and swallowed it. "HMPH, it seems Kinghan has told you quite a bit, even knowing my identity." The old man frowned as he looked at the disheveled boy before him, then took out a bottle of pills from his storage bag and threw it at the boy. The young man accepted the pill, sensing its rich spiritual energy. He was overjoyed, but then, remembering what had just happened, he couldn't help but sigh. "Uncle Shen, could you please wait until the other person has finished speaking before you take action next time?" "So..." The ferry crossing is always noisy, but the noise doesn't reach the inn. Inside the inn, in a room, Jiang Ryuchen wore a simple white dress. After completing her final cycle of energy cultivation, the golden light surrounding her gradually dissipated. The girl exhaled a breath of stale air, opened her clear eyes, and felt that her strength had increased even further. Since checking in yesterday, under the effect of the spirit gathering array set up by Mu Yungui, all the items he bought to assist in cultivation have also been put to use by Mu Yungui, directly turning this room into a place where one can quickly break through realms, with the surrounding spiritual energy even approaching liquid level. Jiang Ryuachin had already reached the peak of the qi refining stage in her cultivation. Exhausted both physically and mentally, the young woman lay down on the bed to rest for a while. Where the girl's gaze fell, Mu Yungui sat cross-legged on the bed, his eyes slightly closed, surrounded by shimmering spiritual energy, his aura stable. Master! Seeing this, Jiang Ryuachin shifted her body like a kitten, moving closer to Mu Yungui. The girl smiled faintly, her crescent-shaped eyes narrowing, looking quite satisfied. So she fell asleep, and when she woke up again, it was the next morning. The girl picked up a booklet that Mu Yungui had bought to learn about the events on the mountain and began to read it, trying to learn more about what happened on the mountain. Jiang Ryuachin felt that time was passing very slowly. Meanwhile, Mu Yungui beside her was still not finished with his cultivation. As evening fell, the girl rubbed her sleepy eyes and stared blankly at Mu Yungui for half an incense stick's time. After thinking for a moment, she knelt up, leaned her delicate body slightly forward, and stared intently at Mu Yungui. A pair of dark red eyes lit up slightly as the girl leaned closer, their noses almost touching. The girl seemed to faintly sense her master's presence. A moment later, the girl seemed to realize something, and her expression gradually turned to disappointment. She fell back onto the bed, her eyes dimming, and she muttered to herself, "Bad master." The girl then sat on the bed, her hands clasped around her legs, staring blankly at the guest room door. Chapter 45, Sword Formation, Thunder Pool. Sword Sect Spirit Ore. The young man's Uncle Shen produced a disc, and then the light dissipated, revealing an opening in the protective array within the spiritual vein. The young man followed Uncle Shen inside. The mine was bright and spacious, but the boy's imagination of the mine being dark, cold, and damp was shattered by the presence of glowing objects wherever he went. Inside the mine, a pale blue stone riverbed was scattered with small pieces of spirit stones that shimmered and glowed. The spiritual energy inside the cave was abundant. As you went deeper, there was a bright blue spirit vein that was hundreds of meters long. Dozens of sword sect cultivators were currently using special tools to mine the spirit vein and cut it into spirit stones of uniform size. As the boy absorbed the purest spiritual energy in the cave, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Mining here feels like a great job." Uncle Shen stroked his beard and said smugly, "HMPH, the disciples who mine here are all loyal people who have gone through layers of selection. Mining here for a few months is equivalent to several years of hard training. But the spirit stones here have been almost completely mined out." After talking with several concealed cultivators in the depths, the old man took out a spatial ring, sealed it, and handed it to the boy. "Here is 500,000 spirit stones, which should be enough for Kinghin and Anjian's expenses. As for needing more spirit stones later, we'll talk about it when Ling Xiao arrives." The boy accepted it with a serious expression and caution. Then Uncle Shen said, "Although you are exceptionally talented, your cultivation level is still not high enough. Although this place is within the territory of our Tai Xuan sword sect, we cannot guarantee your safety. I don't know why Kinghin sent you here, so just in case, Uncle Mo will take you back to the sect this time." "Morrow," Uncle Shen called out towards the shadows, and then a slightly younger man walked out, with a black-sheathed longsword at his waist and a stubble beard. Namoro scratched his head, seemingly annoyed. "Fine, it'll at least delay my cultivation a bit." The boy gave a bitter smile after hearing this. "Thank you for your help, Uncle Master. I will definitely speak well of you to the sect master and holy maiden about your assistance on this trip." After expressing his gratitude, the young man rested for a while before he and his uncle surnamed Mo transformed into a streak of sword light and soared into the sky, heading towards the Tai Xuan sword sect. In the air, two sword lights followed one after another. Uncle Mo, standing on an ancient black sword, paused slightly in the air, waiting for the young man who was trying to catch up. The boy's speed wasn't actually that slow. It was even comparable to that of an average golden core cultivator. However, in the eyes of Morrow, a veteran golden core cultivator, it was still not enough. However, it's hard to say for sure, since upon closer examination, the boy's cultivation level seems to be only at the foundation establishment stage. Isn't there a golden core and nascent soul cultivator among the dark swords? Why would Shen Kinghin send such a young man whose strength is actually not up to par? While accidents are rare within the sword sect's territory, isn't this a bit too overconfident? Is this a Suicide Squad member or a lover? Without further thought, Morrow only wanted to escort the boy back to the sword sect as quickly as possible so he could return to the spirit mine. He had been guarding this spirit mine for 3 or 4 years and was almost at the threshold of the nascent soul stage. Perhaps he could take advantage of the rich spiritual energy in the mine to try to break through to the nascent soul stage. However, Shen-Hu seemed to be unable to bear seeing him succeed and was causing him trouble at this crucial moment. However, Morrow had no reason to complain, since Shen-Hu also shared the surname Shen. "Hey kid, you're too slow," Morrow said, then flashed to the boy's side, grabbed the boy by the back of his neck before he could react, and lifted him up like a chick. "You have to bear it even if it's uncomfortable. Blame it on you for being too slow." Morrow prepared to take the boy back to the sect. Taking a deep breath, Morrow maneuvered his flying sword forward at high speed. In fact, if the sword cultivator focused intently on controlling the flying sword and didn't let his attention wander, his speed could be increased considerably. After traveling for half a day, they weren't far from the sword sect. It was nearly afternoon, and Morrow was preparing to rest and stop when he suddenly felt a strong, explosive aura coming from beside him. Immediately afterwards, a deafening explosion rang out. Boom! With a loud bang, a blinding light illuminated the entire area. Morrow involuntarily took a step back before barely managing to steady himself, his arm covered in blood. Damn it, that kid exploded. When the light faded, he was surprised to find that the spot where the boy had been standing was now tightly surrounded by more than a dozen sword talismans. These talismans transformed into multiple flying swords, forming a sword array about 30 meters in diameter, firmly trapping him. The spot where the boy had originally stood was now filled with countless sword lights flashing with cold light, making it impossible to see what was happening inside. Assassins, people from Shaling Valley. Morrow's heart instantly became alert, and he quickly scanned his surroundings, but he did not find any suspicious figures. What exactly happened? Morrow frowned, a sense of unease rising in his heart. However, he quickly realized that the grade of these talismans was not very high, and if he wanted to break through this sword formation, it would only take a little time. With that in mind, he began to concentrate, preparing to break the sword formation. However, ordinary cultivators can usually only unleash 2 or 3 talismans at a time during battle, and even the most gifted cultivators can only activate 5 or 6 simultaneously. But at this moment, dozens of sword talismans were activated together, forming a sword array. Morrow had no time to think and immediately swung his sword fiercely at the sword formation. A deafening roar resounded, echoing through the sky. Tusk! Morrow thought the sword formation would collapse after his sword strike, but when he cleaved open a gap, he found that the remaining talismanic flying swords quickly repaired the formation, restoring it to its original state and forming a new circular array. However, the power of the sword formation was noticeably weaker than before. Morrow's face instantly turned extremely grim, because it meant he would need to unleash a second sword strike to break the sword formation. Although only a few seconds had passed, in this somewhat eerie moment, every extra second wasted increased his irritation. That boy can die, but the spirit stone cannot be harmed. So Morrow immediately delivered the second sword. His eyes were icy cold. He gripped the sword hilt with both hands, and with a powerful flick, a black sword aura shot out from the blade, like a black dragon, directly charging towards the sword formation ahead. With the clash of sword energies, the sword formation emitted a series of crisp sounds, like the cracking of porcelain. The talismans within the sword formation also shattered, turning into fragments that drifted down. But Morrow's face showed no sign of relaxation. Instead, it turned ashen, and he uttered a string of profanities. Hidden behind the sword formation is a thunder pool. Chapter 46, A Wicked Intention. At this moment, Thunder Pool resembled a gigantic luminous body, continuously emitting dazzling light. These rays intertwined, forming a magnificent sea of light. This sea of light reflected on Morrow's unpredictable face, making his expression appear shifty and uncertain. Morrow just wanted to stab the boy a few times. He really didn't know what he had done wrong. 5 or 6 more lightning talismans, crackling with lightning, floated in mid-air. They crackled and intertwined, forming a circular encirclement. Surprisingly, no one was seen casting this spell. Morrow was filled with doubt and vigilance, unaware of the presence of anyone else around him. Could all of this have been the work of this dark sword? However, the other elders in the spirit mine had all examined the boy's cultivation level, and the results showed that he was merely a Foundation Establishment junior. How could a nascent soul stage expert like Shen who not have noticed? Morrow couldn't understand it at all, and the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He gritted his teeth and reached out to grab the thunder pool. He knew very well that, although the thunder pool was powerful, it was only composed of low-level thunder runes, and the damage from the thunder punishment was not particularly high. He himself was a golden core cultivator, and even without deliberate physical training, a golden core physique was incredibly strong and resilient. At this moment, Morrow seemed to transform into an incomparably sharp sword, charging into the thunder pool without hesitation. Immediately, crackling sounds rang out, and Morrow, like an enemy suddenly intruding into forbidden territory, was instantly swallowed by the lightning pool. However, only a moment later, a crack suddenly appeared in the lightning pool, which then grew larger and larger until it completely tore open. As the crack widened, the lightning runes began to fall off, and the originally menacing lightning pool gradually lost its power, finally collapsing completely. Morrow stood steadily in mid-air, gently exhaling a breath of stale air. His hands had been slightly injured from contact with the thunder pool, but they were now recovering at an astonishing speed. In fact, from the sudden encounter with the enemy, to the formation of the sword array, to the breaking of the sword array and the breaking of the thunder pool, it only took about a minute. Morrow acted decisively and did not make any unnecessary moves. From elsewhere, the place where Morrow was standing looked like a drop of water in a frying pan, with various sword energies and lightning intertwined here, creating an extremely chaotic scene. Morrow looked at the scene before him and understood, but he didn't know which way to go. This veteran golden core sword cultivator was somewhat lost. After the lightning barrier was broken, there was no one in sight. However, what happened is now clear. It wasn't that they were ambushed or assassinated, nor was it a case of murder and robbery. Rather, it was that dark sword. No, it was that mysterious young man who set a trap and swindled hundreds of thousands of spirit stones from them. Chase them? At this moment, crackling lightning and residual sword energy still lingered in the air, making it impossible to know the direction the opponent had fled. Morrow spread his divine sense, a desperate measure, searching an area of 1,000 meters but found nothing, as if the boy had never appeared. Morrow couldn't and dared not stop, so he chose a direction based on his intuition, attempting to find traces of the boy. 500,000 isn't a lot, but it's not a little either. It's actually enough to normally train a nascent soul stage expert. Morrow hated Shen Hu to the core at this moment. They had never gotten along, and now he had let a young man with a low cultivation level escape right before his eyes. But he also bears some responsibility, doesn't he? Morrow realized this, so he wiped his face. If he were discovered, all the guards in the spirit mine would be held responsible. Besides keeping this matter a secret, Morrow hesitated for a moment, then turned around and flew back towards the spirit mine. Wilderness jungle. The flash talisman, worth 1,000 spirit stones, became dull and lifeless in the boy's hands, then turned to ashes and scattered in the wind. The boy flew close to the ground on his sword, moving at incredible speed, weaving through obstacles, making everything in front of him appear to rush past. The boy shook his head, feeling a pang of regret, having already used up his second shadow talisman. Even if you earn 500,000 spirit stones, that old Taoist priest is someone you can't come across again. After the boy blew away the illusionary talisman, he produced a stack of talismans and drew 2 circles of thorns that were empty inside. Once the other party crawled into them, he had already escaped hundreds of miles away, with no one chasing after him. In fact, the young man was quite confident that he could kill Namoro, but after careful consideration, he chose this method instead. Some people say that the dead are more useful than the living, but at this moment the living are more useful than the dead. So the boy let Namoro go, thinking that it might be more effective to have him go back. But whether he killed the other party or not, this kind of thing wouldn't happen a second time. The boy shook his head with some regret. However, looking at the high-grade spatial ring in his hand, Mu Yungui thought that 500,000 was enough. With his spiritual energy almost exhausted, the young man switched from flying on his sword to running and galloping away. But he didn't stop. He took out the bottle of valuable pills the old man had given him, and ate one to replenish his spiritual energy. The boy muttered to himself, "Knowing your surname is Shen, then not everyone in the sect leader's private mine has the surname Shen." His white clothes were soaked through, so the boy took them off and put on the black clothes that he was most familiar with in this life. The young man was none other than Mu Yungui. When Mu Yungui first obtained the map of Dongzhou, he remembered this place and guessed that Shen Lingxiao's private mine was still under development at this time. Moreover, the location wasn't too far from the ferry crossing. Traveling at full speed would only take a day and a half. To be honest, Mu Yungwee's idea was really impulsive. Once he got close, his evil intentions came to him. A single thought can give rise to evil thoughts, tilde. Mu Yungwee shook his head, heartbroken. Alas, but Sect Master Shen has countless treasures, so he probably won't care. I will keep them safe for you. Ryuachin should have reached the pinnacle of her cultivation by now, right? I wonder if she noticed I left the room. Thinking of this, Mu Yungwee touched the tip of his nose, feeling a little guilty. So he summoned his flying sword again and rode it back the way he came. The guest room door was quietly pushed open. The lights were off, and it was completely silent inside. The visitor let out a long breath, then quietly stepped into the guest room, slowly closed the door, and a slight smile played on his lips. Before the person could turn around, a petite figure rushed up and hugged Mu Yungwee, who was leaning against the door. "Ha, Ryuachin, you found out." The girl in his arms remained silent. Mu Yungwee's mind raced, recalling the dozen or so reasons he had come up with on his way home, but he noticed that his clothes were already wet. Then Mu Yungwee patted the girl's head, but couldn't bring himself to say any of the dozen or so reasons he had thought of. Chapter 47, The Musician. The girl simply hugged Mu Yungwee and secretly shed tears, but she quickly composed herself, still burying her head in Mu Yungwee's arms. Mu Yungwee stopped thinking about excuses to avoid worrying the girl, and instead said softly, "I'm sorry for leaving without a word. I just happened to remember that this place is very close to the spirit mine that Shen Lingxiao owns, so I came up with a plan that might work. I left the ferry and went to the Sword Sect's spirit mine. I disguised myself as a member of the Sword Sect and tricked them out of some spirit stones. Although it was a bit dangerous, we don't have to worry about our cultivation resources anymore." Jiang Ryuachin was shocked by those few words and unconsciously gripped Mu Yungwee's clothes even tighter. Jiang Ryuachin simply held onto Mu Yungwee tightly, not blaming him, and asked with concern, "Is Master injured?" Mu Yungwee forced a smile. "You're not injured. If Ryuachin isn't going to blame me, maybe I'll feel better." The girl in his arms sobbed a little less. "Ryuachin knows that what Master is doing is very dangerous. If I were to come along, it would only make things worse. I'm just a little scared. Jiang Ryuachin didn't finish her sentence. She slowly raised her head and looked at Mu Yungwee, her tears sticking to her hair and her face still glistening with tears. The girl never blamed Mu Yungwee. She was just a little scared after Mu Yungwee left, afraid that she would be abandoned again. In the end, she never blamed Mu Yungwee, but she was just unable to help him. Mu Yungwee's face showed a hint of bitterness. Even if he had obtained hundreds of thousands of spirit stones, what good would it do? Looking at Jiang Ryuachin's current appearance, he no longer felt any joy. Her thoughts drifted back to the time she was reborn, when she resolutely chose to save Jiang Ryuachin. This decision changed everything and began a new journey in her life. But what to do next? If not selfishness, then only forward is possible. Before that terrible monster fully matures, a way must be found to shatter her twisted and brutal path to godhood. Mu Yungwee reached out and wiped away Jiang Ryuachin's tears, gently replying, "I'm here, I've always been here." As night fell and the stars shone brightly, a bright moon hung high in the deep sky, casting its silvery glow. The mountain peaks outside the ferry crossing, shrouded in mist, seemed to be veiled in mystery, appearing and disappearing indistinctly. As expected of a superior room, the beautiful scenery was fully visible through the window. After washing up, Mu Yungwee felt some of the increased fatigue from the past few days was washed away. Afterwards, Mu Yungwee truly began his cultivation, clearing away any impurities that might have remained after overusing pills in the past few days. Thoroughly cleanse the body of impurities and regain a pure and flawless state of spiritual practice. No matter how high the quality of external pills is, they will always contain impurities. If used excessively, they will interfere with the path of cultivation. Therefore, cultivators generally do not use pills casually. Jiang Ryuachin explained her cultivation level to Mu Yungwee, who checked it, and then pointed out several areas that could not be perfected. He told Jiang Ryuachin to strive to reach the point where she could enter the foundation establishment stage in the blink of an eye before she could be considered successful. The two practiced in silence, but this time the girl felt at ease until there was a knock on the door. Mu Yungwee stopped cultivating, raised an eyebrow, and roughly guessed who the visitor was. He was somewhat relieved that the other party had knocked on the door beforehand, because the killing formation inside the house had not yet been removed. A young voice sounded from outside the door. "Brother Mu, Ningxian has come to pay a visit. Is this a convenient time?" Mu Yungui stopped circulating his magic and then stood up. The remaining impurities in his body had been removed, and Mu Yungui was not in a hurry to improve his cultivation level, because the person outside the door was more important for his upcoming journey than improving his cultivation level even slightly. Outside the door, Ning Xianqi pondered Mu Yungui's words that day. At first, he didn't understand them, but after figuring out what the other party meant, he couldn't wait to find Mu Yungui. However, 3 days had passed and neither of them had come out of the inn once, so Ning Xianqi couldn't wait any longer and came directly to the door. Mu Yungui pushed open the door from the inside, and Ning Xianqi was startled by the scene inside, which was full of talismans and filled with murderous intent. Ning Xianqi's previously indifferent expression vanished, replaced by deep respect. Mu Yungui leaned against the door and complained, "Brother Ning, were you serious about taking that half-step back? Don't worry, he's not dead." I remain skeptical for now. Although Mu Yungui explained, Ning Xianqi was still somewhat skeptical of the person in front of him. Ordinary people wouldn't fill a room used for resting with so many sword and thunder talismans, would they? Mu Yungui laughed and said, "What if something unexpected happens? What if someone breaks in Ryuochin and I don't have time to react? Our lives are very precious." After saying that, Mu Yungui yawned and then continued, "More precious than the life of the young sect master of Qin Valley, one of the 10 great sects of Central Continent. Central Continent, the center of the entire continent, is where all schools of thought and traditions converge. Its spiritual energy is several times richer than that of Eastern Continent, and the cultivation levels of its cultivators are also much higher. In a sense, the top sects of Eastern Continent would only be considered second-rate sects in Central Continent. The young sect leaders of sects in Central Continent are among the most distinguished individuals." Hearing what Mu Yungui said, Ning Xianqi became curious about the identities of the two. "May I ask who you two are?" Mu Yungui said irritably, "A rogue cultivator. Do you really think someone else's life is more precious than your own? We're not like you. We don't worry about our safety." Ning Xianqi then realized what was happening and asked, "Then how did Brother Mu recognize me? I don't recall ever seeing Brother Mu before." Mu Yungui turned around and called out to those behind him, "Ryuochin, take that book of introductions to the cultivation prodigies of the major sects that we bought a few days ago. Turn to the 3rd page of the Central Continent, the second one, and read it aloud." Zhang Ryuochin sat obediently by the bedside. When she heard Mu Yungui say, "Oh," she responded with an "oh," and a delicate, palm-sized booklet appeared in her hand. The booklet cover had a soft, elegant sheen, and the girl began to read it. Ning Xianqi, son of Ning Chengsu, the sect master of Qin Valley, possesses the body of a spirit of rhythm. He has been proficient in the way of the zither since childhood. His soul attacks are unpredictable, and he is a promising successor to Qin Valley. Zhang Ryuochin looked up at Ning Xianqi, then glanced at the portrait in the album. They looked exactly alike. Seeing this, Mu Yungui smiled at Zhang Ryuochin and said, "That's right, it's him. This is the other so-called prodigy." Mu Yungui turned back and walked to the wooden table in the room where he sat down. He gestured for Ning Xian to come in, saying, "I knew you wanted to talk to me since Miss Zhai wasn't with me. Come in." Ning Xianqi said with a sense of relief, "Can we stay outside? If we were inside, we might die and no one would even know." Mu Yungui smiled slightly and said, "Do you think it's appropriate to discuss the musical attendant here?" Upon hearing the words Qin Shi, Ning Xianqi's expression instantly turned extremely solemn. Without hesitation, he followed Mu Yungui into the room. Chapter 48, The Strings Cease. Inside the room, Zhang Ryuochin poured a cup of tea for the 2 people on the table, and then sat down next to Mu Yungui. Ning Xianqi took a sip. It was just ordinary tea, nothing special. Then he carefully examined the 2 of them. Their cultivation level was only at the qi refining stage, indicating that they had only recently embarked on their cultivation journey. Ning Xianqi couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Mu, how did you know I wanted to ask about the Qin attendant?" Mu Yungui took a leisurely sip of tea, and instead of answering directly, he began to explain the origin of his constitution. There are countless cultivators in the world, and among them are some special individuals. The heavenly Tao distributes some of them to enhance their power. Perhaps some cultivators are born with special abilities, or they acquire them through other means. We call this a special physique. There are 108 types of physiques in the world to date. Some are blessings from the heavens, while others are curses or abhorrent to the heavens. There are also some special ones, such as your rhyme spirit physique. Those who possess the spirit body are favored by the heavenly Tao from birth and are exceptionally sensitive to sound. However, before the spirit body matures, their consciousness is extremely fragile. What was originally a blessing becomes a curse, making them very prone to premature death. And your Chin Valley has produced the most rhymed spirits in the past 1,000 years, so your sect came up with a good idea. That is the Chin attendant, not just the Chin-carrying maidservant as the outside world thinks. It is a woman who takes the heart of a male infant born on the same day, month, and year as the Yunling body, and uses a secret technique to extract the heart. Then, she forms a contract with the Yunling body and merges the heart into the Yunling body. The Chin attendant will then take a portion of the Yunling body's fortune to help the Yunling body through its infancy and protect its growth. And as the spiritual consciousness of the spirit body gradually strengthens, around the age of 20, one can reclaim all the fortune and cultivation that the Chin attendant took away, and the spirit body's realm will leap forward by a major realm, right? Then Mu Yungui looked at Ning Xianqi and said calmly, "And Xai is your zither attendant, a heartless person. After her luck is taken back, she will die." After hearing this, Ning Xianqi suddenly felt powerless, his eyes remaining somber. Mu Yungui shook his head as he looked at Ning Xianqi, recalling some things from his past life. That year, Mu Yungui was 20 years old and had already entered the Golden Core stage, making a name for himself in the Eastern continent. As a result, he paid special attention to other prodigies, and at that time, some events occurred in Chin Valley in the Central Continent, which drew Mu Yungui's attention. Although Chin Valley is ranked among the top 10 sects in the Central Continent, its cultivators are not actually skilled in combat, so it may not actually reach the level of a top-tier power and be ranked last among the top 10 sects. The cultivators within the valley mostly use the zither to diligently cultivate soul-based techniques. High-level cultivators can use music to exorcise evil spirits and heal people, even awakening those who have fallen into inner demons during breakthroughs through external force. It is precisely because of this that the Chin Valley, which is not actually that strong, has managed to squeeze into the ranks of the top 10 sects. Meanwhile, Maoyan Immortal Valley, which was also ranked last among the top 10 sects, was worried about its status. So, after a discussion between the two sect leaders, they arranged a marriage, which also served as a symbol of full cooperation between the two sects. The Holy Maiden of the Wonderful Sound Immortal Sect and the Young Master of Chin Valley. That year, Ning Xianqi, relying on his spirit body, took the first step to the nascent soul stage and married the Holy Maiden of the Myriad Sounds Immortal Sect, with whom he had been betrothed since childhood. These two events occurred simultaneously, shocking the entire cultivation world. That day, the balance of power among the 10 major sects was about to be broken, although the two sects were among the lowest ranks if they were to merge. This journey might just give birth to the world's #1 sect. The very next day, the day of his wedding, Ning Xianqi, the young sect master of Chin Valley, one of the most dazzling geniuses in the Central Continent, with the rhyme spirit body who might become the strongest person in the world, committed suicide on his wedding day, even erasing the possibility of his own reincarnation. There was no Ning Xianqi after that. Inside the bridal chamber, a suicide note contained only 8 characters. If this string does not rise, there is no need to stop the music. This matter caused quite a stir and was a strange occurrence at the time. Subsequently, the marriage alliance between Chin Valley and Maoyan Immortal Sect fell through, and later, even the sect itself declined. Although Mu Yungui was unaware of the inside story at the time, he still felt regretful about it. 100 years later, Mu Yungui became a great sword immortal. He enjoyed exploring secrets, and only then did he accidentally learn about the Chin attendants of Chin Valley, and discover that Ning Xianqi's suicide was actually a suicide pact for love. Mu Yungui's thoughts returned to the present. After listening, Ning Xianqi lowered his eyes and gripped his teacup tightly. I should have known. In the past, none of the musicians with the spirit body have survived. No one in the valley has told me about this. I am the only one who finds it strange. I have searched through all the books but have not found any solution. Mu Yungui's eyes were full of confidence, and he took another sip of tea to moisten his throat. There is a solution to this problem. Ning Xianqi seemed to have grasped a lifeline, his expression somewhat excited. Although he tried his best to remain calm, his voice still trembled as he asked, "If there really is a way, may I ask why Brother Mu would like to help me? I am a warrior of pure love." Mu Yungui slowly put down his cup, a hint of determination in his eyes. It was late at night, and Mu Yungui, who was already exhausted, dragged Ning Xianqi out. Those who didn't want to come in before now don't want to leave. Ning Xianqi, fearing that the sudden hope would slip away, said that if he could, he would work as a doorman for one night. Mu Yungui smiled and asked, Won't the Qin attendant feel uneasy being so far away from the Qin master? Ning Xianqi realized his lapse in decorum and clasped his hands in farewell. However, he still took out a jade ruyi from his bosom and handed it to Mu Yungui, saying that this item had the function of transmitting messages. If there was any danger, he could send a message to him. However, it was a one-time use spiritual treasure and could only be used 3 times. Mu Yungui took the cool jade artifact in his hand and played with it for a moment. Good heavens! Ning Xianqi is quite generous. He just casually handed over a communication treasure worth 10,000 spirit stones. He is indeed worthy of being the young sect master of a major sect. Thinking about how he had practically risked his life to barely obtain 500,000 spirit stones, Mu Yungui smiled instead. They might be able to make a lot of money from this trip. Chapter 49, Kunpeng. The next day, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen had recovered and opened the door to find Gjai, dressed in a black dress, standing there with a box of pastries in her hand. Gjai seemed to have been waiting here for a long time, but he didn't knock on the door. He just stood there motionless. He only spoke after seeing Mu Yungui and the other person leave. Fellow Taoist Mu, fellow Taoist Jiang, my young master said last night that he would prepare breakfast for you too, so he asked me to bring it over this morning. Then Gjai handed the expensive food to Jiang Ruochen. Jiang Ruochen recalled what she had heard about Gjai last night, so she smiled and said to Gjai, "Thank you, sister." Gjai was taken aback by Jiang Ruochen's sudden thanks. She paused for a moment, then felt a strange fluctuation in her emotions. For a moment she didn't know how to respond, but out of politeness she forced a smile and replied softly, "You're welcome." Although her voice remained calm, the kindness in her eyes was undeniable. Ning Xianqi approached from a distance, looking somewhat disheveled. "Sorry, I didn't sleep well last night." Gjai walked over to Ning Xian before he stood up and helped him tidy his clothes. Gjai was curious about what Ning Xianqi and Mu Yungui had talked about last night. If they had only intervened to smooth things over because they couldn't stand seeing the 2 golden core cultivators making things difficult for them, then it was just a funny situation. And what about last night? It was only one night, yet he's already so concerned about these 2. Gjai recalled what Mu Yungui had said, but she didn't know what it meant. Moreover, she hadn't seen Ning Xianqi lose his temper in a long time. The last time was when she was 10 years old, when she accidentally broke a valuable artifact and was supposed to be punished. Ning Xianqi got very angry and protected the girl, causing a ruckus throughout the valley. Aside from that one time, Ning Xianqi has rarely been seen looking like this again. Although Ning Xianqi often seems unreliable, in fact, since Gjai can remember, Ning Xianqi has never made a mistake. A moment later, Ning Xianqi straightened his clothes, and the 4 of them went to the ferry together. At this moment, the ferry was bustling with about 100 people, all of whom were cultivators traveling by boat. If you calculate it this way, including the stops along the way, the whole trip, going up and down, could earn at least 40 to 50,000 spirit stones. Mu Yungui glanced around and saw several young men and women of similar age traveling together. They looked extraordinary, and perhaps their destination was also the immortal Ascension's secret realm. The young men and women seemed to be of noble birth, all dressed in fine clothes and carrying elegant swords. They chatted and laughed, occasionally glancing at Mu Yungui and his group of 4. Among them was a young man in fine clothes, whose brows and eyes exuded arrogance. He seemed to be the leader of the group. He looked at Jiang Ruochen with a hint of curiosity in his eyes, his gaze lingering on her veil. The elegantly dressed young man's lips curled slightly upward, his eyes carrying a hint of mockery. He whispered something to the people beside him, his voice low, but his smile grew even brighter. Then he extended his slender fingers and gently pinched a black pebble. As his magic flowed, the pebble suddenly emitted a faint glow. Then the pebbles shot out and hit Jiang Ruochen's veil. However, in front of Mu Yungui and his group of 4, it was as clumsy as they had already noticed. But they were just watching. As the pebble flew, Mu Yungui was about to intervene, but Ning Xianqi stopped him. Gjai stepped forward, gently embraced Jiang Ruochen, and then instantly caught the pebble, striking it at the boy. The young man hadn't expected the other's speed. While he was still in shock, a crisp cracking sound rang out from his mouth, and then the elegantly dressed young man's mouth was full of blood. The boy realized what was happening and spat out a broken tooth. Before the boy could retaliate, Gjai's calm yet icy voice echoed in their ears. "If you keep pestering us, it might not just be teeth anymore." The elegantly dressed youth had a grim expression. He hadn't intended to harm Jiang Ruochen in the slightest. He was merely curious about her appearance, and was about to confront her when he saw Xai's golden core stage cultivation revealed. So in a fit of anger he snapped. Literally, it means swallowing broken teeth. Upon seeing this, the middle-aged man behind the other party showed an apologetic expression to Mu Yungui and his group and apologized. Mu Yungui nodded. It was just a minor incident. Seeing that Xai had stopped the stone with his hand, Mu Jiang Ryuachin was a little worried. She took Xai's hand, opened her palm, and saw a faint red spot. Then, a power of light surged from Jiang Ryuachin's palm and touched Xai's hand. Xai felt a warmth, and the slight pain had disappeared. "Sister Xai, thank you." Jiang Ryuachin raised her head slightly and smiled at Xai. Her eyes shone with golden light in the morning sun, like a star. Xai looked at Jiang Ryuachin and found her adorable. He couldn't help but want to pat the head of this younger fellow Taoist. But after a moment, realizing it was a bit impolite, she withdrew her hand, turned back to look at Mu Yungui and wanted to apologize. Mu Yungui looked at Xai with a questioning expression. "Give her a pat, isn't my Ryuachin adorable?" Ning Xianqi watched, smiling to himself. Jiang Ryuachin had initially thought the fairy was already enormous from the outside, but once inside, it was even more awe-inspiring. The three-story building has dozens of rooms arranged in an orderly fashion. The superior rooms are upstairs, while the 2 floors below are for ordinary rooms. It's more like a guest house that was forcibly moved upstairs than a ferry. The 4 of them didn't go straight to their rooms, but instead strolled around the deck. Jiang Ryuachin stood on tiptoe, gazing out the window, finding everything fascinating. The first rays of dawn are breaking, and a gentle breeze is blowing. It's truly a beautiful day. A strange feeling suddenly welled up in Mu Yungui's heart. He keenly sensed that a faint gaze was falling on him. He frowned slightly, subconsciously raised his head and followed the gaze, which met that of a woman in the upper pavilion. It was Su Feng. Su Feng was somewhat surprised that Mu Yungui had so keenly noticed her gaze, but she did not show it. Instead, she half covered her face with the fan in her hand and smiled softly. Seeing Su Feng smiling so happily, Mu Yungui also smiled politely in response. Then Su Feng turned and left, whether it was Pang Hai's doing or not. The rooms where Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin lived were next to and connected to the rooms where Ning Xianqi and Xai lived. Although it was a regular room, it was acceptable for Mu Yungui, though a bit cramped for the 2 of them. However, it was spotless and quite pleasing to the eye. It seemed to have been uninhabited for a long time, as a layer of cobwebs had formed by the window. Mu Yungui casually wiped them away with his sword energy after entering. The 2 rested in the room for a while, and then Ning Xianqi brought Xai over. Seeing that the music had stopped, Ning Xianqi spoke to Mu Yungui in his mind, reminding him that it was not convenient to talk about the matter of the zither attendant in front of him. Mu Yungui then asked the 2 why they had come to Dongzhou, a relatively remote place. Speaking of this, Ning Xianqi sighed and said, "I originally planned to visit the Pinglai Pavilion in the far east of the Eastern Continent. As the #1 sect in the Eastern Continent, I wonder if there are any books in its collection that would interest me. I was also hoping to see the Kunpeng, which appears only once every 100 years. But the former did not find the knowledge I wanted. But then I saw the Kunpeng. Actually, I don't quite agree with what Brother Mu said about Dongzhou being a remote place. It is only when you sail out of the far East Sea and see that figure, whose distance is unknown, leaping out of the sea that you realize how vast the world is." Chapter 50, Not in My Heart. The 2 chatted idly, while Jiang Ryuachin and Xai looked out the window. The ferry had already started and was traveling along the river, with beautiful scenery all along the way. Mu Yungui then encouraged his little apprentice to set high expectations, while Xai and Ning Xianqi smiled faintly. Jiang Ryuachin was curious whether there was something even more surprising. After thinking for a moment, Xai took Jiang Ryuachin's small hand and said softly, "Ryuachin, please stand still." Before Jiang Ryuachin could react, the ferry suddenly rocked, and the sound of a magic array could be heard. The ferry was shimmering with light and made a buzzing sound. The girl lost her balance, but Xai caught her. Jiang Ryuachin looked out the window again and saw that her field of vision was widening. The ferry, which was about the size of an inn, was slowly rising into the air. Xai looked at Jiang Ryuachin, feeling the lingering warmth in her arms and felt somewhat at ease. But why was he so close to Jiang Ryuachin? As the ferry took off, it reached the clouds in just a few minutes and then gradually stabilized. Just as the group was about to continue their previous conversation, there was a knock on the door. A sweet, melodious female voice rang out. "Fellow Taoists, is it convenient for you? I have been sent by Lord Hai to deliver some fruits to you." Mu Yungui had assumed that Fatty Hai had already forgotten about the matter, but he hadn't expected that the other party would still remember. To be able to operate a business on the mountain within the rules to this extent was actually quite good. As for Pang Hai, he left a good impression on Mu Yungui and Ning Xianqi. Mu Yungui replied to the person outside the door, "Please come in." Then a beautiful woman gently pushed open the door and entered. The woman wore a gorgeous light red short dress that perfectly showcased her shapely figure. Her delicate and slender thighs, without any adornment, still exuded an alluring charm. Her jade feet wore transparent glass shoes, with a few gold threads tied around her ankles, making her appear even more noble and elegant, like icing on the cake. The pale red dress was embroidered with exquisite patterns, the delicate silk threads interwoven together, resembling a work of art. However, what was most eye-catching were her full and firm breasts, which stood proudly on her chest like two mountain peaks, with a black mole on them that was hard to ignore and made people want to take a second look. "I am a maid on the ship, sent by Lord Hai to deliver some fruits. I apologize for what happened a few days ago." With that, the woman slightly crouched down and gracefully performed a curtsy. This simple gesture alone created a powerful visual impact. The image of surging waves made one's heart race. Jiang Ryuachin curiously examined the woman's exquisite clothes, clicking her tongue in amazement, while Xai carefully examined the melons and fruits. Although they weren't valuable items, they were indeed a token of her affection. However, when Mu Yungui and Ning Xianqi saw the woman's appearance, they seemed to be greatly shocked. Their eyes instantly became as fierce as torches, but their faces remained expressionless. Immediately afterward, the maid bid farewell to Ning Xianqi and Mu Yungui under their watchful eyes. She bowed slightly, then turned and left, leaving the two men speechless. As the maid left, a deathly silence fell, and time seemed to stand still. Ning Xianqi and Mu Yungui exchanged a glance, their eyes flashing with complex emotions. Mu Yungui paused for a moment, then slowly spoke. "Brother Ning, that Kunpeng, Yes, the Kunpeng you mentioned earlier was indeed very large, wasn't it?" Ning Xianqi stared blankly and murmured, "It doesn't seem that big anymore." Ning Xianqi shook his head, let out a long sigh, and said with emotion, "So vast, so expansive, I can only admire it. I have no other thoughts. This is perhaps the most magnificent and awe-inspiring scenery I have ever seen." Mu Yungui nodded. "It's just that the shape is a bit flat. If it had more undulations, it might be even more spectacular." Ning Xian paused for a moment, seemingly recalling the previous scene. However, that touch of black on the snow white was the icing on the cake, like a scroll painting of a snow-covered plain, adorned with a person in black, making one feel that the vastness of the world stretched as far as the eye could see. Mu Yungui nodded in agreement. "I can already imagine what the person in that scene would feel about in that snowy landscape. Big fucking big, white fucking white." After Mu Yungui finished speaking, Ning Xianqi turned to look at him and nodded solemnly, as if he had met a kindred spirit. Jiang Ryuachin, who had never seen a Kunpeng before, didn't quite understand, and her eyes were full of curiosity. What exactly did the Kunpeng look like? From the descriptions of master and fellow Taoist Ning, it was described as large and round. Could it be a ball? Seeing this, Xai could no longer bear it, so he directly covered Jiang Ryuachin's ears with his hands. Jiang Ryuachin tilted her head and looked at Xai. Xai glanced away, finding it hard to explain, and too afraid to meet the other person's innocent gaze. So is Mu Yungui really this kind of person? Or rather, how could someone like him raise such an innocent and adorable girl? Xai looked slightly embarrassed, but turned her face away and spoke to Mu Yungui and the other person. "Fellow Taoist Mu, may I take Sister Ryuachin next door? I have a picture book inside that depicts the Kunpeng, so Sister Ryuachin can take a look." Mu Yungui smiled and nodded. Ning Xianqi then instructed Xai to take good care of Jiang Ryuachin. Xai agreed irritably, giving Ning Xianqi a disdainful look, not wanting to stay there for another second. After the two left, Mu Yungui and Ning Xianqi fell silent. Ning Xian spoke first. "I don't know if it's just my imagination, but it seems like Jia really likes Miss Ryuachin." Mu Yungui said irritably, "Nonsense, Ryuachin is so well-behaved and cute, shouldn't she be?" "No, that's not what I meant. It's just that as a heartless person, Jia's emotional fluctuations are actually very small, and it's rare to see her in such a good mood as she is today." Mu Yungui looked at Ning Xianqi and explained, "Miss Xai is just indifferent, not without feelings. Actually, we should correct a misconception held by people living in the mountains. They always say that those who are cold-hearted and ruthless are heartless." Mu Yungui pointed to his head, "But actually feelings reside here. She was instilled with the identity of a Qin servant from a young age, and a Qin servant only needs to serve the Qin master, so those extra emotions were suppressed and erased long ago under the teachings of your Qin Valley. In the end, not having any intention is not the reason. The real reason is still your Qin Valley. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, Ning Xianqi didn't know how to respond. It seemed that there was still much she didn't know about this maid she had grown up with. The reason she is close to Ryuachin is because of Ryuachin's special qualities, Mu Yungui said with a smug look on his face, and chuckled. A divine heart is here, like a great sun hanging in the night sky beside Gjai. How can a heartless person not be attracted to it and become close to it? Chapter 51, Requirements. In Ning Xianqi's memory, it was said that those born with the heavenly evolution god and demon heart were all people with a powerful aura who looked down on all living beings and were born to be kings. He couldn't associate this with that cute little girl at all. Ning Xianqi asked incredulously, the heavenly evolution divine heart. Mu Yungui nodded. Ning Xianqi had never seen the two of them fight. He had only thought that Jiang Ryuachin had a good aptitude. But now that he heard this, even the Yunling physique was nothing compared to her. Judging from this, Mu Yungui must be quite extraordinary to have become the master of a girl with such an extraordinary physique. In fact, based on what Mu Yungui said last night, Ning Xianqi no longer felt that Mu Yungui was an ordinary rogue cultivator, and that the other party's real age was not that young. The other person's composure and knowledge were simply on a completely different level from his own. It can only be the reincarnation or possession of some powerful being. However, Mu Yungui was not difficult to get along with. On the contrary, Mu Yungui also had a kind of spirit that only young people could have, something that reincarnated people could not fake. However, Ning Xianqi did not intend to investigate Mu Yungui's identity at this time. Since the other party would not say, it would be useless to ask again. Brother Mu, I still want to know what the price is. Ning Xianqi didn't quite understand the pure love warrior mentioned last night, but he knew that no matter what, Mu Yungui wouldn't help him with something so extraordinary for no reason. I do have two requirements. Ning Xianqi, speak freely if I can do it. At this moment, Mu Yungui coldly said, the first one, to kill. Ning Xianqi originally thought that Mu Yungui would want some rare and precious materials, or join Qin Valley as an inner disciple, which Ning Xianqi could provide. However, upon hearing the words kill, which were filled with intense killing intent, he was surprised. Ning Xianqi dared not answer but continued to ask, how much? What level? Let's make it clear beforehand. If Brother Mu can't deal with that demonic person for the time being, I can agree. If he is a good person, although the things that Qin Valley does can't be said to be solely righteous, we have always adhered to the principle of relieving suffering and rescuing those in distress. After listening, Mu Yungui asked, what if I asked you to kill a disciple of a lower cultivation level, and then I would resolve the matter of the Qin attendant? Ning Xianqi shook his head. In that case, Brother Mu, it's best if we part ways. I'll pretend you never mentioned this, and I'll continue to look for other solutions. Qin Gu's demeanor was revealed in just a few words from Ning Xianqi. Was the Tai Xuan sword sect in his previous life never like this? Mu Yungui didn't continue to test Ning Xian's bottom line and said directly, kill bad guys, 1 golden core cultivator, 1 void refinement cultivator. Refining to void realm. Brother Mu, what exactly have you provoked? Ning Xianqi's face was grim, as if he was in a great predicament, but before he could speak, Mu Yungui also shook his head. At the refinement of void stage, even a simple sparring session possesses the power to shatter mountains and rivers. Moreover, even though Ning Xianqi is the young sect master of Qin Valley, he simply doesn't have that kind of authority. Furthermore, Shen Lingxiao's identity is too special, making it difficult to make a move against him. Okay, I'll hold off on those 2 requests for now. I'll bring them up again if needed. However, to show my sincerity, I may frankly state my method for dealing with the zither attendant. The solution I'm talking about is to create a heart. Just like the art of mechanical engineering, by gathering all sorts of priceless treasures, we can create an artificial divine heart. People like Miss Gjai, who have no heart to live, fit the criteria best. Then a brush appeared in Mu Yungui's hand, and a sheet of Xuan paper was spread out in the air. Mu Yungui wrote down more than 30 kinds of rare and precious materials in a smooth and flowing manner. Ancient Phoenix Essence Blood, Mysterious Creation Elixir, Heavenly Essence Liquid, Boundary Origin Glazed Fragment, Root of the Myriad Spirit Tree. After finishing writing, Mu Yungui looked at it as if it were a prescription, but felt that something was missing, so he added at the top, Experiments and applications of a functional heart constructed based on the adaptability of boundary source glass. Mu Yungui nodded in satisfaction. He seemed much more professional now. Ning Xian frowned as he looked at the materials. He could recognize only about 2/3 of them. Some were even priceless treasures. However, upon seeing two familiar names, Ning Xianqi said, Heavenly Essence Liquid and Boundary Origin Glazed Fragment. Mu Yungui nodded. Yes, these two are among the most important materials. Only the world origin glazed glass can withstand the characteristics of other treasures. It is used as the carrier, the outer shell of the heart, while the heavenly essence spirit liquid serves as the power source. Ning Xianqi murmured, these two things. Then Mu Yungui and Ning Xianqi said in unison, the immortal ascension secret realm. Mu Yungui hadn't expected Ning Xianqi to know about this, so she asked with some curiosity. The Immortal Ascension Realm is a secret realm jointly opened by several major sects in the Eastern Continent during this period. Even some sects in the Eastern Continent do not know the inside story. Aren't you from the Central Continent? How do you know this? Ning Xianqi did not answer, but instead rummaged in his pocket for a moment and took out an extremely exquisite token. Mu Yungui, unaware of what was going on, picked up a fairy fruit, took a bite, and asked what it was. Ning Xianqi said, this is the entry token for the Immortal Ascension Secret Realm. I happen to have one. Mu Yungui staggered. This thing. It was quite a coincidence. When we were almost at this ferry, I was invited by a friend of my father to visit the sect he founded. That person was troubled by inner demons when he was breaking through to the nascent soul stage, and it was only through my father's intervention that he succeeded. 30 years ago, after breaking through to the nascent soul stage, that person established a sect in the Eastern Continent. It is likely that he participated in the opening of the Immortal Ascension Secret Realm and obtained 2 slots. However, the major sects such as the Tai Chuan Sword sect, which contributed more, received more slots. Sending their disciples to train was just a formality. Then he asked me if I was interested, and after that I became the representative of his sect. He told me not to fight with anyone inside, and just to pick up some spiritual treasures on the outskirts to broaden my horizons. All the treasures were mine. After listening, Mu Yungui couldn't help but marvel at how small the world is. As expected, Brother Mu is also heading towards that Immortal Ascension Realm. I do need to go to the Immortal Ascension Realm, but that place is where most of the powerful forces in the Eastern Continent gather. If they really take all of the Heavenly Spirit elixir, I don't think I'll be able to get out. Is it certain that we won't be able to get out? Ning Xian nodded in agreement. In the end, this so-called secret realm is just about taking things out and redistributing them. I don't really believe that one family could take everything. The sect disciples who go in are like cormorants, grabbing the treasures inside and then having them auctioned off by fishermen outside. Mu Yungui nodded, agreeing with Ning Xianqi's analogy. Brother Mu, how do you get in without a token? You don't need to worry about that. We can't go in through the front, so we have to climb over the wall. Chapter 52, Spider Web. Compared to Ning Xianqi and Mu Yungui next door, who were discussing things to do, Xai, who was taking care of Jiang Ruochen, had many more things to consider. After Xai led Jiang Ruochen to the room, he added a soundproofing array to prevent any strange conversations from getting through. Xai took out a yellowed book and handed it to Jiang Ruochen, then said, Ruochen, you can take off your veil now. If you're worried about someone spying on you, don't worry, I'm here, Xai said softly. To be honest, she wasn't initially curious about Jiang Ruochen's appearance. It was the little incident with the elegantly dressed young man that piqued her curiosity. Actually, just by looking at her eyebrows and eyes, you could tell that Jiang Ruochen was a beauty in the making. However, Xai secretly hoped to get closer to the young girl. No, it's just that my face isn't very pretty, Jiang Ruochen said softly, her voice tinged with shyness and self-consciousness. With that, she slowly removed her veil. As Xai had imagined, Jiang Ruochen's skin was smooth and delicate like white jade. Her lips were small and rosy like cherries. However, a hideous scar on her cheek marred her overall beauty. Xai frowned and asked, what's going on? The scar had healed, so it was clearly not a recent injury, and since it had left a mark, it could only have been an injury from when the person was younger. What kind of person could do such a thing to a child? Xai was a little angry. She looked at Jiang Ruochen carefully and saw that there were many faded scars on her arms. Jiang Ruochen smiled calmly and said softly, this happened before I met my master. Look, isn't Ruochen perfectly fine now? Then she put her hands on her hips and let out a smug hum. Perhaps Gjai could never have imagined that just 2 months ago, before Jiang Ryuachin met Mu Yungui, she was a thin, emaciated little beggar. However, Jiang Ryuachin did not specifically mention these past events. Instead, after obtaining Gjai's consent, she eagerly opened the yellowed book. Seeing that the girl was in a good mood, Gjai didn't press her further, as it must have been a very painful experience. After hesitating for a moment, he pinched Jiang Ryuachin's cheek. Jiang Ryuachin is actually about 2 years younger than Gjai. She hasn't fully grown up yet, and her face still has a bit of baby fat, which feels just right to the touch. If she grows up in a while, she might fully mature, which is a rare opportunity. Jiang Ryuachin flipped through a few pages, which were full of strange and wonderful stories and rare beasts that Ning Xianqi and Gjai had encountered along the way. However, the Kunpeng did not seem to be what her master had described. A while later, the people next door had finished their conversation. Mu Yungui wasn't idle either. Thinking that Jiang Ryuachin hadn't taken the ferry, he decided to take the girl for a good look around, so he left his room and went to the ferry hall. The hall was bustling with activity, crowded with people, and many cultivators had gathered there, creating a lively scene. A circle was formed in the center of the hall, inside which stood a young girl in a bright red dress. This place seemed to have become a small trading venue, where cultivators could bring out their treasures, pay a few spirit stones to the girl in red, and then she would be responsible for displaying these items. It was like a small auction. Although small in scale, it attracted the attention and participation of many cultivators. As long as the items on display weren't of too poor quality, there were usually cultivators willing to buy them. Instead of hawking their wares at the ferry dock, some people would deliberately leave the items they wanted to exchange on the ferry. With 500,000 spirit stones in hand, Mu Yungui was not idle either, bidding on all items related to cultivation. Over the next 2 days, Mu Yungui began to use the medicinal herbs he had bought to temper his body, while Jiang Ryuachin would occasionally go to seek Gjai. Ning Xianqi would also visit Mu Yungui from time to time. The ferry stopped and started, and before we knew it, it was the 3rd day. Before dawn, the ferry slowly landed at a dock. The ferry crossing at Kiyuming Sect was not too close or too far from this place. The distance was somewhat awkward. Subsequently, those who ran ferry businesses gathered together and decided to build another ferry crossing between the two places. Although this made it closer to both places, cultivators still needed to stop here. Around 4 or 5 in the morning, the ferry stopped briefly, and the monks whose destination was this place disembarked. Ning Xianqi was resting quietly in Gjai's room when Mu Yungui woke up Jiang Ryuachin, who was still fast asleep. The girl, still sleepy-eyed, was still turning on the camera. In fact, by the 2nd day, Jiang Ryuachin had already lost interest in the monotonous clouds outside the window. So Mu Yungui simply closed the window. Today, Mu Yungui opened the window again, feeling the fresh air rushing in. Outside the window, a spider web has been woven anew, still adorned with glistening morning dew, as beautiful as a string of pearls. However, Mu Yungui still reached out without hesitation and gently wiped away the delicate spider web. That was rather disappointing. The ferry had come to a stop and quieted down. Outside, the clouds were low and the air was slightly chilly. Ryuachin, it's time to leave. Mu Yungui draped a wolfskin shawl with animal ears and a hood over Jiang Ryuachin, who was still half asleep. Leaving early can avoid some danger. We're not far from Kiyuming Sect now, but we should still be a little cautious. It is a helpless act of hiding one's true identity in the dark. Jiang Ryuachin nodded. Then, before the ferry started moving, the two disembarked. It was a bit chilly when we arrived here around 4 or 5 o'clock, and dewdrops clung to the surrounding green leaves. Having departed from the Longyuan dynasty and traversed countless secular dynasties, we have arrived here. Wearing a black robe, Mu Yungui looked around. The ferry crossing here was much smaller than other places, and could only be considered a temporary stop. Jiang Ryuachin looked at the map and realized that this ferry crossing belonged to a region called the Qing Shuang dynasty. Mu Yungui had a deep impression of the name of this dynasty, as if it was the same woman who sat on the dragon throne for 100 years in his previous life. The ferry slowly pulled away from the dock behind them. Mu Yungui glanced at it briefly, then turned and left with Jiang Ryuachin. The ship was quiet, and the two people's room was very tidy, except for the cobwebs on the window that made it seem as if no one had ever lived there. A spider climbed onto the web, slowly retracted the silk it had spun, and then crawled along the door frame toward Ning Xianqi's room, spinning a thread of silk before pulling itself up to the upper floor. Su Feng lay on the soft bed, and the spider crawled up her palm. Then a cut appeared on her fair, delicate hand, and the spider crawled inside. Su Feng gently twirled the barely perceptible spider silk in her hand, sensing that Ning Xianqi and the other person's presence was still in the room, and lazily said, "So, do you want to come down with me?" Zhang Tu chuckled. "Yes, I went." Chapter 53, Torture. It was almost dawn. After leaving the ferry, the two did not stop. They walked out of the ferry deep in the mountains and came to a vast plain. This is the ruins of the Qing Shuang dynasty. Before the Empress ascended the throne, this place was a battlefield, a desolate wasteland devoid of life. Then came the constant warfare and invasions between dynasties. Countless Qing Shuang soldiers perished here, followed by new recruits, then teenagers, until even the Empress, then a princess, joined the battle, finally driving the invaders out of the Qing Shuang dynasty. This land, a battlefield where countless bones are buried, was left uncultivated by the Empress, preserved as a sign of respect for the fallen soldiers. After Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen entered this place, they parted ways and walked in different directions. With a sword case slung across her back and a hood over her head, the girl galloped across the grassland. Morning dew soaked her boots, but she had no choice and dared not stop. After traveling dozens of kilometers, when the view stretched out endlessly, she slowly came to a stop. It wasn't that I was exhausted, but rather that the people behind me had caught up to me within 1,000 meters, 100 meters. The other person was just walking, but each step covered dozens of meters. Jiang Ruochen's eyes were full of vigilance. Su Feng wore a fringed dress, a whip made of interlocking bones hanging from her waist, and smiled warmly. "From your conversation, you mentioned the younger sister's name is Jiang Ruochen. That's a nice name. So this is what my sister looks like, and it's not anyone's work, but they really went all out." After leaving Mu Yungui, the girl's demeanor was different. She was no longer so naive, but rather exuded a mature and calm aura. "Did you separate from that boy because you felt you couldn't escape together, so you ran away separately, to leave some hope? But my husband is already gone, isn't he?" After Su Feng finished speaking, she took a few more steps forward, and in the blink of an eye, she was 10 meters away from Jiang Ruochen. Jiang Ruochen summoned strands of golden threads from her fingertips and said coldly, "Take another step forward, and you will die." Su Feng smiled broadly. In Su Feng's eyes, this warning was no different from the prey's counterattack before death, so Su Feng took another step forward. Then a streak of blood appeared on her slender, fair neck. Jiang Ruochen pulled out countless golden threads from between her hands. However, this 10-meter stretch was already covered with fine golden threads by the girl. Seeing this, Su Feng simply smiled and took another step forward. The golden thread shattered, and her neck was completely healed. "Sister, I just wanted to know where Ruochen got that necklace from. You were so ruthless, little sister. You're really naughty." After saying that, Su Feng produced a palm leaf fan in his hand, the same one he had when they met before. Jiang Ruochen clenched her fists tighter and slowly asked, "Would you let me go if I told you?" Su Feng simply smiled and remained silent. Jiang Ruochen's face was filled with murderous intent. "Network!" As Jiang Ruochen shouted, all the golden threads contracted, tightly binding Su Feng. At this moment, the dense silk threads made Su Feng shine brightly on the dim grassland. Just moments later, the threads all broke apart, just like before. Jiang Ruochen's expression changed, and a bead of sweat began to appear on her forehead. Looking at Jiang Ruochen, Su Feng's expression became dazed. Her face flushed, her body trembled uncontrollably, and she couldn't suppress the smile on her lips, laughing louder and louder until she finally squatted down on the spot, somewhat weak. Su Feng wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, composed herself, and said, "Yes, that's exactly it. First resistance, then confusion, then despair, Ruochen. Your performance was absolutely perfect." Jiang Ruochen recalled what Mu Yungui had once told her. Some demons, after eating their fill, would find pleasure in toying with and torturing their prey. However, she had never imagined such behavior would occur in a human. "The person in front of me is absolutely insane." At this point, Jiang Ruochen had defined the other party's character. Su Feng took a deep breath, composed herself, and with a pleasant expression took another step forward. Jiang Ruochen conjured a talisman, followed by a burst of lightning. Although the difference in cultivation level is too great, the talisman can still harm the other party. Su Feng waved her palm leaf fan, and a gust of wind blades met the lightning before exploding. Still not working, Jiang Ruochen then took a step back and summoned another talisman. "Let's see how many talismans you have, Sister Tilda." Su Fengmei narrowed her eyes slightly, her hands moving non-stop. After a few rounds, Su Feng got a little bored. The girl in front of him seemed to have an endless supply of talismans, so he became a little more serious and slashed out with a gust of wind blades, aiming at the girl's right shoulder. A burst of colorful light appeared, revealing a tear in the girl's colorful robe, from which a trickle of blood seeped from her delicate body. Su Feng said with some annoyance, "My sister has so many things, and she accidentally broke them." Su Feng stretched out her palm, and then a huge spider silk appeared between her palms and instantly rushed towards Jiang Ruochen. Jiang Ruochen dodged it. The original spot had been smashed into a deep hole. Heavenly evolution, divine punishment technique. A halo of light appeared behind the girl, and she unleashed her most powerful spell. Su Feng sensed the danger but still didn't dodge. One of her hands seemed to be covered with scales, turning pitch black, and she reached straight for the arrow of light. Su Feng grabbed the arrow of light, feeling a slight resistance, but quickly regained his footing. A scorching heat melted the dark object in his hand, and the light was burning Su Feng's right hand. Very strong. Su Feng's expression turned serious as he sensed the aura that could penetrate the golden core cultivator's body. At this point, even if he was still very interested in Jiang Ruochen, he had to eliminate the threat posed by her before making any further moves. With a crushing motion, Su Feng slowly rose into the air, waving her palm leaf fan. Wind blades rained down on Jiang Ruochen, and the girl could only dodge by summoning talismans. However, attacks still fell on the girl, and her colorful robe was torn and fell to the ground, its dim hue fading. The girl felt a pang of heartache, her brows furrowed slightly, and she bit her lip tightly. It wasn't the colorful robe that bothered me, but rather the shawl that my master had given me this morning, which had already been cut